welcome to Fashion Cast and Ew Cast.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the A Song of Ice and Fire linear reread. So this is episode 53 of it, and we are the Vassals of Kingsgrave, in case you're new. This is an offshoot of a podcast of Ice and Fire, and this episode could potentially spoil any events in any of George R.R. Martin's published works, including the Winds of Winter preview chapters, but it will not contain any spoilers from A Game of Thrones. I'm your host today. My name is Lady Weaver, aka Sarah, and I am joined by...
Hi, this is Zander, Lord Baron on the forums.
Hey, this is Michael, Khal Wadege on the forums.
This is David HHH on the forums.
This is Jock, Jock 2 on the forums.
Hi, this is Tanja, Scilens on the forums.
Okay, and today we're going to be covering the events of the 1st of January, 300, New Year, great, anniversary of Aegon's conquest, and we are covering chapters Sansa 4, Tyrion 8, and Sansa 5. The interesting thing about this one is the linear order is actually the exact same order as the published works, and the start of this day is actually covered in Nadia's podcast, which is episode 52, with Tyrion's chapter number 7. So if you want to go listen to that one first and then come back to ours, that's cool. Taking off where Nadia's podcast left off, episode 52, and it's just still in the morning, and this one's Sansa 4.
Alright, so it is me. I'm actually being a nice sub, and most of this was written by Hannah, who is also Shadow Baby on the forums. Anyway, but this chapter opens with Sansa on her way to the breakfast in the morning of Joff and Margie's wedding. Joffrey begs all in attendance to poison the shit out of him. End of chapter. But I'm just kidding.
Nice.
Anyway, what actually happens is Sansa awakes from a pleasant dream about being back in Winterfell with her family. As she rouses, she becomes aware of the reality that they are all, in truth, all dead. She is alone, but takes solace that by day's end her torments will be done. Joffrey and Marjorie's wedding will take her out of the cruel king's crosshairs. Her husband, Tyrion, is not with her. As being an early riser, he leaves her to dress for the queen's prenuptial breakfast in solace. She has an exchange with Shay about the curious clouds making shapes like castles in the sky. Shay's pessimism breaks through the optimistic fantasy as she notes, if the clouds show a castle, it's one in ruin. Sansa is not waiting to reflect on ruinous seats of power and changes tact, asking if Tyrion will be along. They are expected at Cersei's breakfast promptly. She bathes and dresses. The noontime wedding and 77-course feast would follow the ballroom breakfast. Tyrion comes to escort his wife, and he begins drinking, looking disheveled. Pot is in tow. Sansa urges Tyrion to change into fresh garb. Sansa reflects that Pod looks the proper squire for once, and how at first she feared him for his unfortunate kingship to Ilyn Payne, but then how she had come to realize that he was just a timid boy who was afraid just as she was afraid. Once at breakfast, which includes a laundry list of foods and descriptions of food, and drinks, many drinks, and foods, Tyrion smartly remarks, there's nothing like a huge breakfast to whet your appetite for a 77-course. As the dining ends, the courtiers begin presenting the couples with gifts for their individual persons. Among the many fine gifts, Tyrion gives Joff a rare tome, Lives of the Four Kings. It covers the reigns of Darien the Young Dragon, Baelor the Blessed, Viserys II, Daeron the Good, and Joffrey is very unpleasant by the gift of education. He says Tyrion should read less and impregnate more. He threatens to rape Sansa after he conceives with his bride-to-be. Mace Tyrell offers his soon-to-be son-in-law an ornate chalice. And the first note I have on this from Hannah is that If Mace is giving the victim the delivery method of the poison, does that indicate any sort of complicity in the act? And to continue, Tywin gives to his grandson a magnificent new sword of Valyrian steel. The metal is rippled red and black. He swings the blade to test it, and Adam Marbrand cautions him on how deadly sharp Valyrian steel is. Joffrey says, "I remember, and I'm no stranger to Valyrian steel." He names the blade Widow's Wail and proceeds to slice the lives of 4 kings in half. He informs Tyrion that he owes his gracious self a new wedding present, as the one he'd be given is all ruined. What a guy. Tyrion says that he'll get him a knife to match his sword, and describes not a new dagger, but the dragon bone-hilted blade sent to kill Bran. Joffrey gives him a sharp look. He then comments that a gold hilt would be more suitable. Tyrion takes Sansa by the hand as they make their way to leave for the wedding. And that is essentially the end of the chapter.
Thank you, Zander. And thanks for coming on at very short notice. It's a bummer that Hannah couldn't be here.
And thanks, Hannah, for the
No, it
comments
really
and
is,
the
yeah.
summary.
I actually do have a few notes on this chapter. This first one is about the chalice, and this is one of the notes Hannah wrote for me. And it's about the chalice that Mace gives Joffrey, and she's saying about how a parallel can be drawn in the order of this gift giving and Joffrey's demise. Like, he first reviews the book because, of ignorance and insults, and then the second, the chalice, is related to gluttony, vanity, and enmity and closest allies. And then the third is the sword, which his own hot temper and violent nature, his fierce, viscous nature, and love of weapons does not protect him. He has a sword, but no shield to combat assassination. So it's kind of like the order of the gifts given, it really kind of shows his own hubris of the sort of king and person he is, which I thought was really awesome. So I wanted to highlight that. And then
that had never really occurred to me. I think that's really interesting.
Nope.
No, I didn't either, and that's why I really wanted to read that, because Hannah pointed that out very, very awesomely and astutely. But then the two notes that I had that I didn't put into the summary was, at the start of the chapter, Sansa learns the fate of her mother and brother at the cause of the Red Wedding. And then near the end of the chapter, Sansa actually tells Tyrion she would rather not know the details of how they were both killed at the Red Wedding. Mm-hmm. And Tyrion, in one of, I think, his last moments of goodness, tells her that he won't tell her anything else.
Was it at the start of this chapter? I thought it was a couple of chapters ago that she had heard about the Red Wedding.
Okay, so I read or skimmed the rest of them earlier today, and it was Tyrion found out about it in Tyrion 6, so it's Tyrion 6, Tyrion 7, then Sansa 4, and then in between Tyrion 6 and Sansa 4, Sansa's found out about the Red Wedding.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Which was probably, earlier today or yesterday?
Yes, between the 20th of December, which I can actually find out exactly what day Tyrion found out about it.
It's not that important.
Yeah, I feel like there were a few more days, like she didn't learn it this morning or anything.
Right.
Yeah,
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, maybe she was like brooding on it for a couple days, kind of thing.
And it's probably something she can't really talk about because, given her situation.
Who can she?
Right. Who's she going to talk to about it to? Because if she even says it to Tyrion, she doesn't know if Tyrion's gonna, she even says to her like, "Oh, I don't care. He was, he was a traitor." That's what she has to say.
Yeah.
To stay alive.
Yeah, in the previous chapter, he reflects on how he wanted to, how she locked herself away and was crying, but didn't show any emotion towards him, and he wanted to go in and comfort her, but then decided not to. So. Yeah.
One little moment I liked at the beginning of the chapter is Sansa notes that Tyrion likes to walk alone down Traitor's Walk, And I wonder if that wasn't deliberately a little foreshadowing of what's going to happen soon in his trial.
Probably.
Yeah, with that scene with Sansa waking up and realizing Tyrion's not next to her, she says that it's normal, and normally she finds him out in the solo reading, or he'll go down to the kitchen or that sort of thing. So I'm wondering, how many times does he go off and have the hanky-panky and rumpy-pumpy with Shae,
Right.
and Sansa has no clue?
I was thinking that too, but like Shae is actually in like there when Tyrion isn't, at least in this chapter. So I thought of that too.
But even if he was with Shae, would Sansa really care? I mean, if anything, him getting on with Shae lessens the pressure on her to do so.
Yeah,
I think she'd probably feel bad because she'd feel like she'd failed her wifely duties or whatever. So I think she'd feel guilty about it, even though she'd probably also appreciate it.
In saying that, on their wedding night, Sansa says that she may never actually lay with Tyrion, and Tyrion says it's okay, that's why they made whores. So
True.
It has been acknowledged, but I don't think Sansa knows that there's a whore who's her maid.
Especially that's her maid.
Yes. And it seems like Shae's very pissy, though, because Sansa's remarked that Shae's actually shot her insolent looks before on multiple occasions. So I think Shae is getting a bit too big for her britches. And it's just
you can see her mask is sort of faltering a bit. Yeah.
With the clouds, I thought it was very interesting because we see what Sansa sees, and that's 2 castles. And I thought that could be a representation of her living in 2 worlds, or having like 2 sort of different homes, one being back home in Winterfell and the other one being in King's Landing, which is where she has to be now, and they form one castle, or there's only one at the end. And whether that's because Winterfell's gone and all of her family is dead, so she only has one castle now and only has one home, which isn't really a home, but yeah,
not a safe one, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then I thought it was funny that Shae sees it and she classifies it as a gold castle and being made gold. And I thought that was very interesting because it does show what Shae really wants, and that is money and gold.
A castle of gold.
A whole castle. I do think it's funny here how George, now he has the last moments, we're about to lose Joffrey, so we have to just really make sure we're happy that Joffrey dies, because we get to see between this chapter and the next exactly all the reasons why he's such a horrible, horrible, horrible person. He just crams it all in here.
It really makes the Tyrell's motives seem a lot better. Like, they're not poisoning Joffrey out of ambition. They're just doing it to defend Marjorie.
Yes.
I would completely agree with that.
I was gonna say, but I'm not sure, that it's a bit of a Martin unlike thing to do, because I do think he tries to set up characters in ambiguous ways and tries to make us sympathize with characters we wouldn't normally sympathize with.
Yes.
And I feel like that would be the one moment to do that. Not that I don't know, maybe Joffrey is just too far gone for that. And of course there's plenty of horrible characters who are just not redeemable at all, so
yes,
maybe that wasn't a good point. Never mind.
No, but with what you're saying, Martin does make it very clear that we should fear for Marjorie's safety.
I love that Joffrey decides to name his sword Widow's Wail. I mean, really, Joffrey, how many widows have you created at this point? Who have you killed yourself? No one, really, right?
He's ambitious.
I mean, he wants to, but the fact is, there was a huge battle that came to your city, and you hid down in the basement.
He's also like 12 or something. But...
I know, but still,
I thought he manned the scorpions, like, off the walls. Like, he couldn't go out, but he wanted to do something, so Tyrion got him on the scorpions, and then Cersei's like, no, what are you doing?
Right.
Yeah.
He had command of the trebuchets, I think?
Yeah.
Or something. Something where he was personally not doing anything.
Right.
But he got to look like he was working.
He got to feel like he was a big boy.
Right. Well, that's what's so great about him. He always talks about, I'm gonna take the head of this character, and I'm gonna widow's wail. I'm gonna kill them all, and all that, and he never does.
No, I actually find it very ironic that he names his sword Widow's Wail, but actually he's the one who dies, and he leaves his own widow behind.
That's a good point.
Although she's not really wailing, but
yeah.
And as well. So Cersei actually gives Joffrey his wife cloak, and it was the one that was used at Joanna and Tywin's wedding and Cersei and Robert's wedding. And Sansa remarks that it looks threadbare. With it, I actually wonder if it's cursed or a bad omen, or it could just be foreshadowing from George, because Joanna died prematurely in childbirth. Robert died / killed by Cersei-ish because of the boar, also prematurely. And then Joffrey dies in 2 chapters' time, which was definitely prematurely.
I think it also just shows the naked ambition of the Lannisters. It really should be a Baratheon cloak, but they're like, no, he's going to be a Lannister for this wedding.
Yes.
That is a very good point. But I think most people, lots of people die prematurely anyway in Westeros, so I don't feel like...
Sure. I don't feel like it shows anything. But
I don't think it's the cloak's fault.
With what you said, with Joffrey should be wearing the Baratheon cloak, the next chapter, spoilers are now coming, okay. In the next chapter, Tyrion thinks that Margaery should be wearing a Baratheon cloak instead of a Tyrell maiden cloak, because she was married before. So it would have been 2 Baratheon cloaks swapping over, so...
Yeah, that would have been boring.
That's true.
Technically, because she's still a virgin, I think she can get away with wearing the Tyrell cloak.
Yeah, it's the only reason why, but I still thought it was kind of funny.
No one wants that Baratheon cloak. The black looks terrible.
I mean, it pretty much, as soon as Robert's dead, they don't even pretend anymore, that the Baratheons have anything to do with this. I mean, if you think about it, theoretically, the Lannisters should have nothing to do with this family, because as soon as she's married, she is now a Baratheon. She's not a Lannister in any way, really. I mean, that's how it works in this world.
I mean, I don't know, people do seem very attached to, the houses they come from. So it doesn't seem... I mean, it's weird with Joffrey, I guess, because Joffrey should definitely be a Baratheon.
Right.
But with the women, I'm not sure.
Sometimes Catelyn will refer to herself as a Tully.
Yeah, exactly.
As she died.
Yeah, but Cersei does it all the time. She never calls herself a Baratheon.
She doesn't consider herself one.
No, and
But she should.
That doesn't strike me as extremely weird, though.
You'd think she'd at least pretend, though. I mean, that is her only claim to power.
I don't think we even hear anyone else calling Cersei a Baratheon ever. It's always as a Lannister.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting because some of the women definitely think of themselves or as portrayed as becoming part of the house they are married into. And then some, like Cersei, are still very much separated from the houses they marry into and think of themselves as their maiden houses.
Yeah.
You can see this in the way that Cersei dresses as well. She's always wearing gold and red, or she's wearing green jewels to match her green eyes. Yeah. Very, very symbolic.
It is. Joffrey is kind of similar because it's always red, and I'm going to spoil again. And in Tyrion,
it's okay.
In Tyrion
it's okay.
8, all of the decorations in the throne room where they're having the feast, they're gold, red, red/crimson and green. And the gold was supposedly the Baratheon house, but the Lannisters are gold and crimson. So it doesn't make sense to call that the Baratheon house when really it's just more Lannister colours.
Yeah, Baratheon are black with a bit of gold, but yeah, very deliberate choice of colours there.
Yes. Rather than having black and crimson and green.
One of the things I really liked a lot about was when we get a little of that history in the when they talk about the book afterwards, back when Tyrion talks about it with the Red Viper. We get a little of that history, which is that the first time we'd really heard the story of Baelor in the books?
I think so, yeah. The full story of him and his peace with Dawn.
You know, and I thought, and I like all that world building in there. It's a weird place to throw it in, but it works, you know, and I like it.
But yeah. Jock, do you have any points on this chapter?
Well, firstly, this chapter makes me hungry. Just going to say that straight
So
away.
much food porn. Oh my god.
Oh, wait till you get to the next chapter.
The next chapter, exactly. Spoilers again.
77 courses. How is that even practical?
How can one
Like, how much?
How's it
eat that,
possible?
No,
how's it
but how much?
possible?
Never mind eating all of it, but just like logistically, how much time would that take?
It's right.
When you're
Even-
king,
Maybe
lots
some
of
of it's
king,
like
it does.
preserved stuff, and they've cooked it over the
No.
last few days.
No. I don't even mean preparing it. I mean just serving it. Just serving it and then clearing the dishes away and bringing on the next course. All of this takes time. Like 77 courses. How much time do you need?
Okay.
Do you need per course?
Right.
This doesn't.
I'm
Yeah,
a
it
waiter.
sounds like a nightmare. 77 courses for 1,000 guests.
I'm a waiter, and I work functions. Maybe not this crazy.
So-
And I'll tell you, doing 3 or 4 courses takes forever. Now, 77, that would be like a 2-day thing.
Yeah, if you have 77 courses and you say each course takes just 10 minutes to serve, eat, and clear up, which is maybe a bit unrealistic for like 1,000 people.
Very
But if every course takes 10 minutes, you're there for like 13 hours. I don't. But
But you know, it's the freaking king. It's not like they're gonna walk away bored. They don't have any choice. I mean, especially with Joffrey as king, would you really want to walk away from that wedding?
But my point is,
Hell
this can't
no.
possibly have been. This wedding must have taken more than 12 hours because they
Right.
also do like other stuff and there's entertainment and shit. Like,
Not even planning the wedding. That's not even
yeah,
wedding.
like, yeah, like if they're doing nothing but eat and super quickly and everything is served really efficiently and quickly, it'll take them
the whole
more
day.
than 12 hours.
The
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is just not. This is one of those things where Martin was like, nah, whatever. No, I don't care how far places are apart. No one's gonna do the math. I won't. So, I
mean,
don't
if
think
it was
77 courses is realistic. Sorry.
Yeah,
if it wasn't Joffrey's wedding, that sounds like a pretty decent party, like all day of eating and drinking and dancing,
Just a food orgy.
essentially.
And it
Just
was
a-
77 dessert courses.
Oh my god. Well, just
I'd be
imagine
up for that.
if you had 2 bites of each course, just 2 bites. Think about how full you'd be.
I know. I wonder whether they're tiny servings, so it's like an inch size of everything.
They must be, and then presumably
Yeah,
not everyone
really
has
small.
everything. But
I wonder how many cooks they have in the kitchen cooking everything.
And it would have to be hundreds.
yeah,
I mean, think about how much food that is for 1,000 people. 77 courses. That's 77,000 portions. If each cook did 100 of them, you know what I mean?
I mean, I'm assuming not everyone gets every course. Because
Well,
that's not practical. I don't know.
It's extravagant. Yeah, that's what George was thinking. It's like, yeah, this is great.
So back to Joffrey. I think it's interesting that right now, finally, out of the blue, Tyrion figures out that Joffrey was responsible for sending the killer for Bran in the first book. I mean, it's weird after like a couple of books, suddenly out of the blue this happens, and I wonder if this was not just George going, oh crap, he's about to be dead, and if we don't reveal this now, it's going to be irrelevant, and that was kind of one of the 2 major mysteries of the first book.
Yeah, it seems a bit like oh, I forgot this. Oh crap. Let's just put it. Yeah, no one will notice. It's fine. It
Right.
fits. It's not weird.
Right.
It definitely had to go in right now, though.
Maybe
Because
he intentionally made it 77 courses so people would be so confused about the logistics of that everyone would just be like, huh, what? That's a bit weird with Tyrion. I'm figuring it out right now. But 77 courses? That just doesn't sound right.
Yeah, and
I
no,
think that's the
actually,
strategy.
it seems weird that he's still thinking about it because we haven't seen him think about it for however many chapters, and then it's this chapter that he's suddenly like, oh my god, he did it. And I don't think it's just because he's drunk off his fucking face.
Right.
Like,
Although maybe, you know, sometimes you get those moments of clarity.
It's because he recognizes the
I mean-
Valyrian steel, and Joffrey keeps talking about how he's familiar with it. But even so,
Right.
it's like, that's a bit of a leap.
It's still forced, right? It's forced. I mean, obviously he's trying to make it fit naturally, but I wonder if it's just a, oh crap, I'm out of time. I got to reveal this now.
Do we know whether Joffrey? Do we know how planned it was for Joffrey to die? As in, whether George had planned that?
I imagine. So I imagine such a major event didn't just sort of happen.
No, I mean, but do you think he had to pull it forward for some reason, and it was going to happen later, and he was going to have more time to reveal that, and then for some reason
maybe because of the 5-year gap.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But the 5-year gap only kicks in later, or was meant to kick in later.
Right.
Yeah.
After this book ends, so.
And anyway, if he had, like, this is chapter 59 of, I think, 70-something or 80-something in this book. So he could have had it, like, chapter 1, Tyrion 1, and done it then, and then have the rest of it. Or earlier. He had a lot of chapters where he could have put it in earlier in just this book if he realised he had fucked up.
Or at least sort of set it up, like he could have made Tyrion not figure it out, but think a bit more about it. I think that would have helped if he just set it up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely had time. Oh, by the way, I just want to mention the fact that Tyrion toasts Aegon in this chapter.
Who does he praise?
Aegon the Conqueror. So I'm going to read this quote bit because I think it's kind of cute, and it's fitting because we're doing, like, the 1st of January, 300 AC. So
yeah, it's the new year, man.
Yeah,
Time
it's
to
the new
celebrate.
year. It's New Year's Day. Woo! It's a new century, my lady. The 300th year since Aegon's conquest. Tyrion toasts Aegon. To Aegon, what a fortunate fellow. 2 sisters, 2 wives, and the 3 big dragons. What more could a man ask for? End quote. No, I thought it was very cute, and I actually think that this might sort of hint at Tyrion going over to Dany's side and his desire for dragons and the things he sort of wants in life and has gotten. Because 2 wives, he has had 2, because Tanja and Sansa, and then the 3 dragons because he's always been obsessed with dragons. So it's fitting.
Oh, and I like Tyrion's one of his last lines in this chapter. The boy's earned himself a dagger, wouldn't you say?
Joffrey?
Yeah.
Fuck no. He got Widow's Wail, okay? Valyrian steel, trumps daggers.
No, he means he's earned a dagger in the heart.
Oh yeah, like, definitely.
Like, there isn't too much foreshadowing here, you know? He all threw it.
More obvious, George.
Right.
I thought it was really funny that we have Sansa and Tyrion both think multiple times about killing Joffrey on his wedding day, and then he does actually end up dying, and it was neither of them. I thought it was kind of funny.
Although they both got blamed for it.
It's probably on every one of the wedding guests' thoughts, like, God, I wish this guy would just die already.
Right.
And they'll feel guilty afterwards. Oh, I thought it was interesting that Prince Oberyn gave Joffrey a brooch in the shape of a scorpion. And I kind of thought this might have been a joke that only Oberyn gets, because he gives this little speech about how scorpions fell on, like, a Lord Tyrell the last time they tried to conquer Dorne, and that shattered the peace. And I just thought maybe there was some symbolic things going on here.
Good catch, I like that.
Yeah, good cat. Yeah, but that's actually a very interesting point, that it's could also be seen as a bit of a threat, because we've had Oberyn keeps going around wanting justice. So Tyrion 6, I think it is actually, that they mention it.
Yeah, he's definitely stirring the pot.
Definitely, it's very much a, bro, I'm subtly threatening you, you probably won't get it, but Tywin probably will. Is there anything else on this chapter?
Ooh, one more thing. Continuity error. Ilaria is said to have 2 of Oberyn's bastards by Sansa in this chapter, when in actuality she has 4. So I think this was just a retcon when A Storm of Swords came out.
Yeah, probably. Or we could give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he didn't know. Like, the person who says it doesn't know any better and has their facts wrong.
Still on the first chapter of this very dense book of chapters.
Do we want to move on?
Yeah, alright.
Yes.
Get to the wedding itself. Alright, so I've got the summary. So, Tyrion watches as Joffrey and Margaery are wed in the Great Sept. In between thinking that he needs to piss because he's drunk too much, Tyrion tries to guess why Joffrey decided to order the assassination of Bran, now that he knows he did it. Tyrion ponders the future of Margaery as Queen of the Realm, noting that Sir Loras has his work cut out for him, and also worries about his own safety, surmising that his days are numbered once the king comes of age. As they leave the Sept, Tyrion notes that the commoners adore Margaery so much that they are willing to love Joffrey once more. Tyrion has been unable to make any progress towards intimacy with Sansa and finds time with her to be painfully uncomfortable. As they converse with the other courtiers, Tyrion notices Sansa's ease of conversation with everyone and reflects that she would have made a good queen and a better wife if Joffrey simply had the sense to love her. They bump into Lady Olenna, but nothing really important happens here that will be relevant for later, and they take their seats next to Garland Tyrell and Lady Leonette. With the deaths of Balon Greyjoy and Robb Stark, the conclusion to the War of the Five Kings is clear, and tonight's ceremony is designed to show off the combined power of houses Lannister and Tyrell. An already tipsy Tyrion begins to get even more drunk as we are treated to perhaps the greatest amount of food porn witnessed in A Song of Ice and Fire. The guests feast on buttered snail soup, roast blood sausages, poached swan, peacocks in plumage, wild boar, trouts in almonds, roast herons, boiled crabs, blandisserie soup, capon chunks, rondels of elk and blue cheese, all the while fools tumble, bears dance, and singers sing. The theme of tonight is rewriting history of the Battle of Blackwater, as singers ascribe new motives to Renly, give valiant deeds for Joffrey and Cersei to do, all while erasing the role that Tyrion played. Khal Tyrell proves what an awesome bro he is by being perhaps the only person to acknowledge the crucial part that Tyrion played. Tyrion notices that Sansa is not eating or paying any attention to the festivities. He asks whether something is wrong, but thinks it is a stupid question as her entire family has been killed and she is married to a Lannister. Joffrey calls forth his royal jousters, provoking much laughter, whereupon Tyrion realizes that they are dwarfs riding a pig and a dog. After much frolicking and foolery, Joffrey calls out for Tyrion to ride the pig, hoping to shame him. However, Joffrey is no match for Tyrion's wit and ends up being mocked himself. This leads to Tyrion getting doused with wine and becoming Joffrey's new cupbearer. Things are about to get ugly, but Margaery appears by Joffrey's side to call him away, saying that the wedding pie is ready. Margaery proclaims that Widow's Wail was not meant for slicing pies, so they call forth Sir Ilyn to brandish his sword. The reveal of Ilyn Payne's new version of ice demonstrates once and for all that despite having gold for thousands of years, the Lannisters are nothing but new money, ladder-climbing trash without class or honor. Joffrey comes back to terrorize Tyrion, but as he takes a swig from his refilled chalice, he begins choking. As he starts spewing out more wine, shit hits the fan and all hell breaks loose. Joffrey tears at his throat, men shout out useless commands, Margaery and Tommen begin to cry, the High Septon begins to pray, and Tyrion realizes that Joffrey is going to die. Guests are rushing out of the throne room while some are coming in for a closer look, but Tyrion can't seem to find Sansa for some reason. Tyrion decides to upend the royal chalice, still containing some of the wine that Joffrey had drunk. When he hears Cersei shriek, he knows that Joffrey is dead. But before readers can savor this moment, our joy turns to sorrow as Cersei accuses Tyrion and his wife of poisoning the king and orders their arrest.
Great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty important chapter, you know.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, is this the first real crowd-pleasing moment that he's had in all the books? I mean, what really is as big as this in terms of all the fans are happy now? I mean, maybe Dany getting her dragons in the first book, maybe Dracarys, but I mean, this is really like the biggest happy moment. All the big moments we've had till now have been horrible that make you want to throw the book and cry.
But it really doesn't last long because
Right.
Tyrion immediately gets accused, and that's not
Right.
as great. So
Plus, why would you be happy about this chapter? Like, why? Can't see a reason. None. None at all.
I think it's sad that Joffrey died.
So sad.
In Joffrey's final moments, actually, I would say that's sympathy. Not that there is much, but you do get a little bit of it. Where it's like, wow, Joffrey looks so scared. He realizes that he's going to die as well.
And Cersei too.
Yeah, and Cersei's like, she's seeing her son die at his wedding and choking, and she can't do anything. And I fucking hate Cersei, but I also feel a bit bad for her in this point.
Right.
Definitely.
Right. Even Tyrion does. Even Tyrion does.
And Tyrion actually thinks that he's just like, oh wow, Joffrey has Jaime's eyes, so I think he's thinking about his brother as well in that moment of sympathy.
Right.
But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have very little sympathy for either of those two, but it is. I don't know if you do. I do think that you can look at it briefly from a more generous perspective, and seeing your child die in front of you on their wedding day is pretty bad. And at the end of the day, he's still really, really young, and it's still, like, to some extent, a tragedy that he turned out that way. I mean, I'm glad he died because he was awful, but at the end of the day, it's a shame he turned out that way, and he is still a child. And
George has a great quote about this. It was an interview with Entertainment Weekly after they aired it on the show, but it's pretty much the same scene, so I'm not spoiling anything. But he says, Joffrey in the books is still a 13-year-old kid. There's kind of a moment where he knows that he's dying and he can't get a breath, and he's kind of looking at Tyrion and his mother and the other people in the hall with just terror and appeal in his eyes. You know, help me, Mommy, I'm dying. And in that moment, I think even Tyrion sees a 13-year-old boy dying before him. So I didn't want it to be entirely, hey-ho, the witch is dead. I wanted the impact of the death to still strike home onto perhaps more complex feelings on the part of the audience, not necessarily just cheering.
And I think he achieved that. I would say he achieved that.
Thank you so much for reading that quote, because that's exactly how I felt. Like, the first time I read that chapter, that's exactly how I felt. Like, I didn't get like, yeah, Joffrey's dead, because obviously I didn't want him around. But, like, I had that, like, I kind of alluded to you earlier on what you posted, and it really is, to me, it's the same way. I had the same way effect with the Red Wedding, obviously different emotions. Like, with the Red Wedding, I went crazy with Catelyn, because she was going crazy, and, like, I literally, the first time I read that, I laughed out loud after I finished the chapter. But, like, the same way that I finished this chapter, it was like my whole body dropped, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is a child. This is a kid, and his mother is holding him, unable to do anything, kind of thing.
Yeah, and he was murdered. It's not even that he just died, it was that he was just murdered. And his friends and family on something that in most cases would be the happiest day of a lot of people's lives.
Exactly, and all of us have like younger relatives, whether they be nieces or cousins or anything like that, that we could relate that sort of young age murder is just horrifying, and George writes it perfectly. You know.
Though, to be fair, at the same time, that kid has just been about as horrible as he gets in the books.
Exactly.
Just to Tyrion and earlier in the day. In the last two chapters, he's been about as horrible as he gets. So you still have to cheer a little. I mean, I was cheering.
Exactly.
I will admit it. I was totally cheering.
That is the beauty of how he writes this.
Exactly.
Like, you almost feel guilty for being happy about him dying.
Almost.
Yeah, but George is good at taking you for the ride. You know, he makes you feel the emotions he specifically wants you to feel.
Absolutely.
It's something that great authors do, to be able to manipulate their audience's emotions.
And one of the other things too is, as much as it's, a happy we get rid of the bad guy and all that, at the same time it's not really what the audience wants, because let's be honest, what we really wanted was one of the Starks to actually kill him. I mean, if it'd been if in the end
and we're robbed of it.
Right, if that had been we would have cheered.
I wouldn't be happy if it was Arya. I'd prefer it if Sansa killed him, personally.
If Sansa had, gone and stabbed him in his sleep or something, that would have been the best thing ever.
Or if she was the one who actually poisoned him and put it in his cup.
And got away
be
with
a
it.
lot happier because it's her arc coming full circle.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's poetic
No.
justice.
But it's George. We're not getting that.
I still would have liked if she put him into the spike moat and then her and Sandor just left.
There you go.
Yes, that would be good, and no one would realize that he was dead yet. But
And it'll be a very different
Exactly.
One thing I thought was interesting is the first person who says that he's choking is Marjorie, and I'm wondering if, if that was her. Like, does she know? Do we think she knows?
I don't think she
I
did.
don't think.
Yeah, I
she
don't think she
knows.
does either. I think the only person in that room who knew is Olenna.
Ooh,
Yeah,
Agreed.
or-
I don't think even she knew.
Yeah, I don't.
I think
Marjorie-
I don't think the Tyrells did it.
Oh,
You don't
Wait,
think
you don't think
they
Tyrell?
did at all?
Elena did it.
Jock, who did it?
Elena took the freaking gem
Well-
from her hair.
Yeah.
Tell us who did it.
Yeah, but do we know it's a gem?
Well,
yeah,
why,
we know.
why
know
was
it's
the gem missing?
I just
I
don't
mean,
trust
strange.
Littlefinger to be telling the truth.
Well, but Littlefinger never said it. I mean, remember, Sansa figured it out herself. She catches the gem missing. And, I mean, it's really clear when you reread it. The first time you read it, you don't catch it at all. But when you reread it, Olenna putting her hands through her hair,
And
It's-
fixes
yeah.
her hairnet.
Right.
And then even when the wedding pie is being revealed, it mentions that Lady Olenna is walking near the chalice. Like,
Right.
she stands up, and it's like, yeah.
Yeah, Joffrey tips the chalice of wine over Tyrion's head. Garland talks to Tyrion and Joffrey. Marjorie comes over, and then Olenna comes over.
Yep.
And yeah, so
No.
she's actually
Right.
there when
It's got-
Tyrion's picking the chalice up.
I actually think the only people that knew were the Queen of Thorns and Marjorie's brother, not including Loras.
Garland. I actually think Garland might have known because Garland and his wife, Lady Lynette, were sitting next to Tyrion. I can't remember which one was sitting right next to him, but one of them was Garland was right next to Tyrion. So Garland would be the brother who knew about it, if anyone apart from just Lady Olenna knew.
Garland certainly seems like the smarter one, as opposed to, like, Loras. If you have to have a co-conspirator, you're telling Garland.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And Garland also seems to be the nicest or most sympathetic to Tyrion as well. Whether he's playing that up so Tyrion likes him, and like that way he's distracting everyone around them so Lady Olenna can put the thingy in the chalice as well.
I wonder how many other people were involved. Were they doing it? Were they distracting him? Or was it just her alone?
I like to think that it's just her. That makes it more dramatic, almost.
Yeah.
Like, if
Yeah.
it's not a big con. Like, basically, Littlefinger and Olenna, these two people in the entirety of Westeros, knew that Joffrey was going to die tonight.
Hmm.
I'd actually be interested to see what Sansa's cue was, because she obviously knows at some point that she needs to run out of the throne room. And it wasn't, when Joffrey dies, get out of there, because she's so shocked by it. Again, spoilers for next chapter, but she obviously had been
Yeah.
told something.
I don't think she thought that anything was going to happen here. She just thought this is a good time. I mean, this is when she was going to escape. Like, I don't think it had anything to do in her mind with what was going to happen at the wedding. It was just, while everyone's busy after the wedding, escape.
Or it might have been there will be a distraction. At that point, make your escape.
When the wedding pie comes, make your escape. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever know, because not knowing makes it more exciting, but yeah.
Who here thought that George was going to list all 77 courses?
He made a good
I
attempt.
wouldn't have been surprised.
To his credit, there's only about 10 or 12 here. And
Right.
like,
I'm sure he listened to himself. He probably did, and then his editor was like, "George, you can't,
Right.
you can't do that."
Back
Or
when he
whether
had an editor.
listed to himself and then culled some of them out and be like, oh no, they'd be watching the feast at this point, like not watching the feast but watching the entertainment, cut these ones out, like that sort of thing. But oh my god.
When we get the sequels to the World Book, we'll probably get all 77 listed.
I
You should
wouldn't
make
be
a
surprised.
recipe book and have all 77 dishes in it.
Well, there
you get
has been,
some of them in the Feast of Ice and Fire.
Right.
They've
Yeah, the
included
Inn at the
some.
Crossroads thing. Yeah.
I have that book. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a good book.
one thing I liked, by the way, earlier, at the beginning, during the maiden cloak scene, Tyrion thinks, who will protect you from Marjorie, from Joff? And we're about to find that out. Who's actually going to protect her?
I wrote that down too to bring up because I thought it was a great quote. And then he thinks to Loras, you had best keep your sword well honed, Sir Loras. And it's like, no, bro. Grandma's got her back.
Exactly.
So I thought that was very cool.
That is such an awesome grandma to have, though.
I know. I wish my grandmas were like that.
Right.
I love my grandmas.
I wish my grandmas would poison people for me.
I know, right?
I would love that. I would love that.
We need one.
My grandma poisoned us.
She's got a little ring with poison in it, and whenever she meets someone she doesn't like, just...
No, whenever you meet someone you don't like, you sick her on. Tyrion notices that Littlefinger is out of the city and thinks that he's really clever for being there and getting to avoid the wedding, which nice little foreshadowing there too.
Yeah, prime the audience for his return.
Mm-hmm. And he also thinks right about then, I wish I could escape to Casterly Rock.
And he actually asks Sansa, I think it's this chapter,
right,
to go away with him to Casterly Rock to get her out of this city.
Right.
And she says no, which
right,
I thought was very interesting. And then in this chapter, when the Queen of Thorns is fixing Sansa's hairnet, she asks Sansa to accompany her back to Highgarden, and she's planning on leaving the 2nd of January, so the next day.
Right. Subtle.
So, I don't know. I wonder whether the Tyrells, or at least Lady Olenna and Marjorie, do actually quite like Sansa, or whether it's they're planning on taking Sansa away and still marrying her to Willis, or whether it is just because they want to get her out of Dodge.
I get the impression it's a bit of both. I do think they genuinely like her, but I also don't think they'd bother too much with her if they didn't see some political advantage in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Pretty much 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
And as well, for them, it's a bit of getting two birds with one stone. Yes, we like her, but as well, it's a great political advantage, which is what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely think it's both.
One other great Queen of Thorns quote. As she's listening to all the crowd and all the different bands, and they all do Reigns of Castamere, and when we hear it like 3 or 4 times, when the next one comes up, she goes, I do so hope he plays us the Reigns of Castamere. It has been an hour. I've forgotten how it goes.
I love her so much. Just those biting comments from her are fantastic.
Couple other things about the death itself. Did you notice that Joffrey claws at his neck, just like Catelyn clawed at her face when she died? I like the little parallel there. And another one was just as he's dying or dead, the dog sniffing at Joffrey's corpse. It's like the ultimate indignity when you have a dog sniffing at you in the middle of the wedding. Why would a dog even be there?
Because they're eating all the scraps, bro.
True. With 77 courses worth.
Like, that dog knows what it's doing.
What Tyrion thinks at one point makes me very upset, and this is the quote: grief had given her, that Sansa, a haunted, vulnerable look. If anything, it had only made her more beautiful.
I thought it's a bit gross.
It's so upsetting. And then he says, I wanted to reach her, break through the armor of her courtesy, and then he asks her to go to Casterly Rock with him. But that line, that sentence, makes me so upset, and because so many people love Tyrion so much, and they won't necessarily think about the perverse nature of thinking that grief makes someone beautiful.
I mean, yeah, he's pretty gross at times, so I think people are going to overlook that because he's like fun and whatever, but
I feel like I started to dislike Tyrion even before their wedding, so like this just like solidified it for me, and then Dance with Dragons was just like, yo, I don't like him.
I think in the last few chapters he's really become an alcoholic as well, because he had 8 glasses of wine at the breakfast and has been drinking the whole day, like the whole fucking day.
Yeah,
he drinks so much. Like
before breakfast.
Sansa even tells him to change because he's just like drunk as shit, and he looks at.
Pod asks him twice to change. Twice. He tells him where the Dublé is twice.
And I mean, I have sympathy for his situation because I think he's he has a lot of shitty stuff to deal with.
Right. I mean,
So I think it's understandable to some extent that he turned out the way he did. But he does say and think a lot of gross,
horrible things.
Yeah.
what option does he have other than drinking at this point?
And I mean, I think also...
just like his sister, so...
There you go. All those parallels that they would deny.
They're more similar than they think.
Yeah, they're more alike than Jaime and Cersei.
Personality-wise.
That's very true, yeah.
Absolutely.
And as well, they hate each other, and whether it's... Do they hate themselves then? If they hate each other and they're so similar?
Oh, definitely.
Well, absolutely. They both are super self-deprecating.
Cersei, man.
I don't think Cersei's aware of it, though. I think Tyrion's aware of it, Cersei's not.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, exactly.
It's a very interesting parallel in how she relates to both of her brothers. I think she's very much in love with herself from a superficial perspective, and
Which is why she's in love with Jaime.
Yeah, like she's really into herself in that sense, but she probably doesn't. She probably doesn't like who she is very much. She doesn't seem like a very happy person. So
Yeah. And, like, she might not think of not liking herself, but she knows she doesn't like the characteristics of herself that Tyrion has.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's funny, in A Feast for Crows, we see her, when we get into her mind, and she's, like, cackling with glee when she thinks that Marjorie's being imprisoned, and she seems happy, but I just read that and I'm like, God, Cersei, you're just so miserable deep down under.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as well with Cersei, like, forcing herself on Lady Merryweather, having sexy times and stuff, and acting like Robert, like...
And she's like, yeah, I'm in control now, yeah, this is great.
Yeah,
It's
just
so weird.
Total
It's
over
so-
the edge.
She hated having that done to her, so why would she even want to do it to anyone else? That's...
Because she's got the power. Because if there's one thing Cersei... you could describe Cersei with, it's lacking empathy. She's never had empathy for anyone else.
And vindictive.
Right.
But to be sympathetic here for a moment, like a lot of, I mean, people deal very differently with experiences of sexual violence, and some people, in some people, it ends up manifesting that they just end up screwing everyone they can, as a sort of coping mechanism and a sort of way of trying to regain control. I think at the end of the day, a lot of people who've experienced sexual violence very much aim to regain a sense of control over themselves and over their bodies. And then people go about that in very different ways. So I have some, not that it makes anything okay, but I have some level of sympathy for that.
Yeah, a lot of abusers end up abusing. A lot of abuse victims end up abusers, which is awful.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And what you're saying...
just seems...
What you're saying actually very much matches Cersei, because she's trying to take control of herself, of her own circumstances through her sexuality a lot, and uses that to control people. And then in the bedroom, at least with Lady Merryweather, she's the one who wants to be in control very much and forces her will upon someone else.
Yeah, Cersei's just we need a whole Cersei podcast. You realize that this is probably the first time since, in Winterfell in the first book, that this many characters are in one place in one scene. We don't really, so much of this happens all over the world, but so many of the characters are in one place for this, and it's one of the few times we'll ever see that in the books.
True, because there's a reason why everyone's gathering, same as the Red Wedding had a lot of characters as well, named characters, because again, it's a wedding, it's a big event, and Tyrion's trial still has a lot of characters too.
Right, but this probably has the most of anything since the first. Since the very beginning when Robert's coming down to visit.
Yeah, because at that point all of your named characters are at that first location, because then everything splits off from there.
Because that's where the king is, and the king's here as well. Well, now he's not, now he's dead, but yeah.
The king was here.
Who was the king?
Joffrey has left the building.
With Joffrey, I wonder whether a lot of the reason why he is so twisted is because of how he was raised, and the
Or maybe it's
representation of
incest.
fatherhood he got from Robert. Like, because
Absolutely.
Robert
Yeah.
abused Cersei a lot where Joffrey would see it, and he always emphasized violence and being a warrior over everything else. So
He abused Joffrey as well, both verbally and physically.
yeah.
I think that you have the very telling moment of when he cuts up the cat and he brings it to Robert.
Oh God!
Right.
Why would you?
And he
then-
hits him so hard his teeth fall out.
Yeah, which is like the absolute worst thing you could have done. Like,
Yeah.
if Robert had just sat him down and been like, you must never do that again because you will be king and the king must protect all his people.
Right, and
Like,
that sounds
But
like
that's
Robert.
not Robert.
That's not Robert at all.
Yeah. Definitely.
I mean,
And
when
as
does
well,
Robert have a
with-
conversation?
with Ned.
Never. Yeah. No. With
Yeah, I mean, there's a number
Joffrey-
of reasons. I'm sure there's a number of reasons why he turned out that way, and I do think ultimately it is tragic because I don't think he had to turn out this way, and I think even.
Exactly.
I mean, it never would have happened realistically, but if he hadn't died, if he had somehow ended up in a different environment, maybe he wouldn't have been beyond redemption. Because at
As
13,
well.
you know, like,
I-
people can change so much.
Yes, and
I-
as well with this, he is very young, and he also has a lot of power, and no one really has been reining him in.
Right.
Especially
No one can read.
since Robert died, no one has been reining him in.
And
The
Robert
only
wasn't
person
doing a
who
good
sort
job.
of has been Tywin, and that's been for a very short space of time, and Tywin doesn't know everything. And like
Yeah,
Tyrion isn't always there. Like
Right.
the people who could rein him in often aren't there, or they don't hear about things.
Yeah, I think if
and then he's
Tyrion
the
was just
king.
around more. Yeah.
He's also the king. I mean, there's only so much reining in you can do. I mean, if anything else, that the scene of Ned's death proves it. I mean, everyone was horrified by it, but what could anyone do? He said it. It's happening. I mean, he's the king.
Yeah.
Well, technically Cersei was the Queen Regent, so if she'd actually had a spine, but
And
of course
stopped it.
Cersei.
It
Nice
would've-
job, Cersei. You started a war.
Right.
No, and as well, she should have told Ilyn Payne straight up before they walked out there and be like, there is not going to be a beheading today. This is what is happening. And like laid it all out very clearly so no one would go and kill.
Well, I don't
Ned.
think anyone expected this to happen. So,
I know, but
And again,
come on.
Cersei
Except
has a soft
Baelish.
spot for Joffrey.
Knowing Joffrey, that's a bit nearsighted. I mean, if
Maybe. But do we ever really see the worst in our kids? Come on.
I mean,
Well-
The thing is, Robert
know.
does
Yeah, I
though.
guess.
Robert, I think it's in the first book, he's speaking to Ned,
Well, it's not
he's
actually his
just
kid.
Joffrey's a bit messed up.
Well, Joffrey actually isn't his kid, though. So.
I don't think so.
I know, but
Right.
he
Does he,
thinks
though?
of Joffrey
Does
as
he?
being his kid.
I think he does.
Does he? Do you think he? Well, that could be a whole podcast.
I think
He's
it's
stupid
more
enough, I
dramatic.
would say, yeah.
If he doesn't know.
I think if he knew, Cersei would be dead though. Like,
Yeah, I don't think he'd tolerate that.
no.
That's true. That's true.
I think he'd put up with a lot of shit. So I think he really doesn't want to deal with anything difficult, and he'd put up with a lot of stuff. But I don't think he'd tolerate that.
Or as well, do you think he'd put up with Cersei having a consort, like someone she sleeps around with,
No,
so
I don't.
Oh,
long as
no way.
they don't have any children?
No way.
Yeah,
No.
no.
No way.
Like,
No.
surely you gotta
I don't know,
disappoint
because
Sansa,
Robert
and you know
has
that.
Robert sleeps with so many women.
Yeah,
But he's
then-
Robert.
then
He's a
we're-
man,
We're
And
talking
Cersei's
about
a
very
woman,
fundamentally
Patriarchy.
sexist. Yeah.
and it's his woman. No, there's no way he'd put up with.
Yeah, like this
Very
is really
possessive.
disgusting, but that is how it is in that world. So
One interesting thematic thing I was thinking as I was reading this was that Joffrey's story is very much the story of a bully who has no idea how to lead, getting the ultimate power and doing horrible things with it. That kind of resonates now with the world we live in, don't you think?
kind of.
Ooh, topical.
Let's not bring politics into this. Like,
Let's bring politics into this.
no, let's have
Let's
this as
go
an
into it.
escapist podcast, okay?
Right.
Escapism. Oh, wait, okay. I have a quick point. With the wedding chalice, Tyrion is the person who finds it on the floor and there's like half an inch left in it.
And he
And
pours.
he looks at it considering it, and then he pours it out. So I wonder, A, whether he was about to actually drink the poisoned wine, and then we'd have a dead Tyrion, which would be kind of funny. But also, like, I don't think he should have tipped it out, though. Like, that's evidence, bro.
Right. You gotta wonder why. Why would he do that?
He's thinking if this becomes a trial, because he's already thinking, 10 steps ahead, and they test that wine and they find out that it's poisoned, that looks even worse for Tyrion.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, but as you say, it's like if you flee from a scene of murder or something because you're the most likely suspect, and it makes you look even more guilty.
I would actually think he wasn't thinking because he was already so drunk that he was just like, oh, I could kill myself, I'm just gonna dump it. And then, maybe he already knew no matter what he's screwed, but, I think it was more so a non-reaction because he was already drinking for, what did we say, 14 hours, 15 hours? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think this is very calculated.
Well, he looks at it and he considers it,
Right.
which, in a drunken moment probably took 10 minutes.
But as well, by considering it, it could be to drink it, or it could be to tip it out, or what to do with it. It could be anything because it's not specifically stated.
Right, you just kind of imagine him wobbling forward and backward looking at the glass, trying to figure out what to do with it.
Or whether he's thinking about vomiting into the chalice and is like, oh, maybe. No, I'm fine.
Gross.
Okay. Do we have any more points for this very special chapter?
Why don't I end with a quote that another quote from that interview I mentioned earlier. He says, I didn't want it to be unrelentingly bleak, referring to the whole series. I don't think anyone would read the books if everything was just darkness and despair and people being horribly tortured and mutilated and dying. Every once in a while, you have to give the good guys a victory, where the guys who are perhaps a lighter shade of gray have a victory over the guys who are a darker shade of gray.
Thanks for all the quotes. This is really
It's very good.
I found that interview, and I love it.
Yeah, they're good.
Does Jock ever tell us who he thinks did it?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's asleep.
First I'll explain a few different possible people.
Yes,
First,
okay.
Olenna wasn't the only person to use the...
Was it the moon dragons?
To mess with the thing. Yes. But, Shay also was in contact with the thing in the morning when she was putting it on.
That's a good
Could have
point. But
swapped
she
them out.
doesn't... Does she strike you as the kind of person who would... it takes some level of planning and with an organization to kill someone, and I don't see Shay doing that.
Here's an interesting twist. What if, there was some talk, some people had said that maybe Tywin knew about it? Now, given that Shay ends up with Tywin, maybe he was planning it all along. Probably not, but just a thought.
Well, I guess that's a separate controversy about the whole Shay and Tywin thing. I'm not convinced.
And Shay does ask to be a server at the wedding, but Sansa and Tyrion say no.
Ooh, I can see a crackpot theory coming together.
I don't actually believe it. I was just putting out some interesting evidence.
You've got 3 dots, they join. This is great.
It's proof. It's proof.
Confirmed. Confirmed.
Yes, confirmed.
It is known.
It was really Shay and Tywin all along.
It is known. Jock, do you have other suspects?
Yeah, Oberyn, obviously. But I don't think he'd do it. The poisoner poisoning someone isn't really the best alibi.
But I mean, by that logic, you can't be a poisoner because you could never poison anyone because you're the poisoner. What?
Yeah.
But
He
not
could
so
be in a
logical.
different location when he does it.
I guess.
The other thing is, Joffrey wasn't the intended target, it was Tyrion with the pie, because of the lemon icing that was put on it. That Joffrey then eats.
Yeah, I've heard the pie. I've heard the pie being poisoned a couple of times, but
Right.
yeah.
Oh, I guess because we don't really know whether it was the wine, I suppose.
Right, we don't know for sure. However, if it had been the pie, it would have to be just his pie, or else we could have a whole lot of death going on.
That is true.
Which, if Littlefinger was responsible, maybe that would be kind of cool. He likes, as we're about to find out, he likes, a lot of chaos, and if a whole lot of people had died at that wedding, there'd be a whole lot of chaos.
The Joker of Westeros.
And as well, with how fast acting the poison is, you could also guarantee that a lot of people wouldn't die. It'd just be the people who'd be served first, so mainly Lannisters and Tyrells.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And there's still the poisoner who could easily be blamed. Who hates the Lannisters more than Oberyn Martell?
Yeah, that is good, yeah.
So do we, of all of us on this podcast, does everyone but Jock think that it's Olenna, or are we all a little open to it?
Yeah.
It was Olenna.
It's gotta be Olenna.
I'm not 100%
Yeah.
convinced, but I'm like somewhere around 90% convinced that it was her. I would be open to other possibilities, but I'm not. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think
Other
as I reread
possibilities-
this... Go.
No, I was just going to say other possibilities are very interesting, and I enjoy listening to theories about different possibilities, but I do think it's Olenna.
Exactly. I mean, I think, if anything, rereading it again now just made that clearer to me. Which I totally didn't get the first read.
See, and I firmly believe Olenna poisoned Joffrey, but I also am firmly in the belief that Oberyn poisoned both Tywin and the Mountain.
Okay, I think he poisoned the Mountain. Not so sure about Tywin.
I'm 50-50 on that one. I could go either way. Not that it matters in the end, but...
And Tyrion also could have done it because he was so drunk.
He just
It was
forgot
just
about it
alcohol
in his
poisoning.
own POV.
He drunkenly, on accident, poisoned someone.
Could you imagine if it was just because Joffrey was so drunk and it wasn't even poison or anything? It was just because he was so drunk. And one of the people actually shoved a spoon down his throat, and that probably just made it worse.
Right.
Yeah, they're all shouting out really stupid things like "tip him upside down," and then they're like cutting his jacket or whatever open, and it's just like you guys need to learn the Heimlich maneuver.
Right. Well, I mean...
Another great
But that
point
wouldn't have
on
helped,
Martin.
And it's funny because Pycelle's like, take me to my room to get my potions, not just you run to my room and get my potions so I can look
Right.
after this kid now. Like,
Let me get out of here.
Even
Well,
Pycelle doesn't want to rush it because he wants Joffrey to die.
Right. He's like, let me go back to my room. It's all the way across town, but I'll be back in a little while.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
can you
just
justify
fine.
that by saying that it kind of doesn't make sense to send someone else because I wouldn't know where to find them or what potions to get?
I know, but I'm sure they have servants there and just be like, get this, because he probably has a case that he normally takes out when he's seeing people. Go get this case, it's in this place, and come back, like ASAP. Because he's an old doddering man. How fast does he expect to go
No, that
to
is
his
true.
rooms and get back? Like,
That is true, but I think you could make an argument for this being necessary.
I like that Mace Tyrell was also shouting things and no one was paying any attention to him. It's a very Mace thing to do. He thinks he's the most important person in the room, but everyone's just like, whatever, Mace.
Oh.
Sir Pufferfish?
oh man, Mace, I'm sorry, bro. So we'll move on to Sansa 5 then.
Here
So
we
like
go.
I said before, it's still in the same linear order. You won't get lost flipping through your books. It's easy.
Okay, so aftermath. Actually, we technically moved back a few minutes, but as Sansa's escaping into the Godswood, a bell is tolling for Joffrey's death. Sansa, sobbing, thinks that Joffrey dying was terrible to watch, which Lady Tanja praises her for. She's full of conflicting emotions. She finds a change of clothes that she had hidden in a tree and changes into them, replacing them with what she had been wearing. She notices the missing amethyst in her hairnet and figures out that it was somehow the cause of Joffrey's death. Dontos appears, drunk and as creepy as ever, calling himself Florian to her jonquil. Ew. She accuses him of poisoning Joffrey, but he denies it. He tells her that Tyrion has been arrested. Sansa wonders who's really at fault. Was it her for wishing it? Did Tyrion really do it? She realizes that she'll be blamed as an accomplice. Either way. Dontos leads her out of the Godswood as more and more bells are tolling. Dontos is wearing his old surcoat with the arms of House Hollard so that he could be a knight, for this at least. He takes her down a long gallery to a cliff outside the castle with a hidden ladder down. Sansa is afraid, but Dontos tells her this is the only way and guilt trips her that if he doesn't, then he'll be responsible for both of their deaths. He goes first, and she reluctantly follows, urging herself to be brave like a lady in a song. Dontos leads her to a skiff that is waiting for them, where a man named Oswell, we later learn is Kettle Black, rows them down the river into Blackwater Bay, past Tyrion's chain and past where so many had died from wildfire. Eventually, they reach a trading galley. Oswell helps her up a ladder to the deck and follows her, while Dontos remains in the boat. As Lothar Brune wraps her in his cloak, her savior is revealed as dun-dun-dun, Peter Baelish. Dontos wants his reward of 10,000 dragons, but instead gets 3 crossbow bolts, killing him. Lothar Brune drops his torch on the corpse to destroy Dontos' body and the evidence. Sansa is shocked and says that Dontos had saved her, but Littlefinger says that he sold her for the promise of money and that he might do so again. Littlefinger reveals that, dun-dun-dun, he had written the note and was responsible for everything Dontos had done, but that he couldn't befriend her openly. She asks if everyone and everything in life is lies, and Littlefinger says, almost everyone save you and me. Ew. She's gone from one creepy older savior with an unhealthy obsession with her to another. As he takes her to her cabin, Littlefinger reveals that he was responsible for the jousting dwarfs. He implies that it was to help set Tyrion up to take the fall. Widowhood will become you, Sansa. She asked why he had Joffrey killed, and he says no reason, just to keep his enemies confused. He says that this strategy is the best way to play the Game of Thrones, and clearly hopes that she'll learn this lesson and play the game herself eventually. Then, just to push the creepiness factor up to 11, he reveals that he loved her mother, Catelyn. Ew. And just for the icing on the cake, he claims that he took her maidenhood. Ew. He says that in a better world, Sansa would have been his daughter. Ew. He tells her that she's safe and sailing home. Ew.
Yeah, that's a pretty appropriate chapter summary.
Right?
All of
Very,
the...
very comfortable.
You know,
I started that with like 1 or 2 oohs, and I just had to keep putting more in because they were all so ew.
Yeah, it's all pretty gross.
you realise this is actually like her 3rd creepy older savior, because there's Zander, Tyrion, and
True.
now Littlefinger.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
It
now
goes
it's
from less to
Uncle
most creepy.
Littlefinger.
Huh?
Now it's Uncle Littlefinger.
No, it's Daddy Littlefinger.
Not quite yet.
No.
Just want to be Daddy Littlefinger. Gross. So
No, the
gross.
thing is, he wants to be Daddy Littlefinger, and he also wants to be Hubby Littlefinger.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just weird.
Not good.
his name is Baelish. He should understand he's not a Targaryen.
I like this whole, hey,
The
I
other
fucked
weird-
your mom. Like, this is not an okay thing to say to everyone.
It's all just good. I mean, it's like, you gotta think, is this really the best moment to be revealing? You know, she's this traumatized, she's in the middle of this. Oh, by the way, I popped your mom's cherry.
There is no good moment for revealing that.
Right.
This is
But
something
this is
you
one of the
should never
worst.
reveal.
But
This
this
is not
Keep
the-
thinking like mother, like daughter, I'm gonna pop your cherry too.
Right, clearly.
Like,
Oh!
what the fuck?
He probably thought about thinking that, and then he about saying that, and then he was like, "Oh no, but that would be creepy." And then he decided not to.
I don't think he
So
ever.
that's what happened.
Littlefinger's creepy.
But here's a question: do we believe him? Do you think he did?
About the Catelyn.
Yes.
I think he thinks he did. I think he thinks he did.
Yeah.
He thinks he did, but really, hell no. Isn't it?
Right.
Haven't they spoken about it being because Littlefinger was like drugged up? It was after Brandon Stark and Littlefinger's duel over Lady Catelyn,
Yeah, and it was
And-
really Lysa.
and
Yeah.
he'd been injured, and it was Lysa, and
Yeah.
Littlefinger was too hopped up on everything.
Do
Yeah.
you think even now, though, like years later, he still thinks it was Catelyn and not Lysa?
He might be in denial
Of
about
course.
It's a lie he's telling to himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And as well, the first time he spoke to Catelyn after what he thinks was having sex with her was actually in Game of Thrones when she came down to King's Landing.
Have
So
they
it's
not
not
spoken
like
since?
he double checked anyway.
Yeah.
That's also a weird thing to double check. Like, hey, sorry, did we?
You send a text.
Did we? sucks.
No, but like he could have sent a letter and been like, "Hey, it was nice popping your cherry," and she'd be like, "What
He
the
did.
fuck are you on
What?
about?"
That is a
He
very
did.
weird.
He sent her a letter and she burnt it.
Yeah, she just never replied.
Burnt it.
Yeah, it was just like, "Go away, you creepy stalker! Come on, fuck's sake! I'm
Yeah.
not married to get away from you, okay?"
She left him
Bye.
on red.
No, but you actually did send a letter.
But yeah, so I feel like in that chapter, I think this is already kind of part of seeing Sansa transform into, like, she's learning to kind of think for herself, and she's much more analytical than we've seen her in the past.
Because we see her putting together who she thinks killed Joffrey, and we see her putting together that one of the stones is missing from her hairnet, and she's putting it together that was poison.
Right.
We're definitely starting to see that change. Like, absolutely.
Yeah, I think she still has a long way to go at this point.
Right.
But it's definitely heading in that direction. If you remember the little girl that went and told Cersei about not wanting to leave,
Right. Yeah.
like she's come a long way since then. So,
Yeah, definitely like her first steps into like understanding what's going on.
Although I do love that even though, even with all the awful things that Joffrey's done to her, that she's still traumatized by his death and seeing it, and she even feels a little guilty about it. Like, is it my fault for wishing it on him? Like, did the gods make this happen because I wished it? And I like that.
I find the feeling traumatized about it. I'm sure Marjorie wasn't genuinely sad about his death, but she was crying at the wedding, and I think that's a traumatizing thing to see. There are like maybe one or two people I'd genuinely like to see dead, but I wouldn't want to be around for it happening.
Right.
And I'm sure I'd feel quite traumatized if I saw someone die, particularly under such horrible circumstances. And I don't think you hate that person. You just don't want to be around for that. You don't want to see that.
Right.
And as well, there's a big difference between wishing someone was dead and going through and actually killing someone or seeing them die.
I mean, I'm sure she genuinely
Absolutely, yeah.
dead. I'm sure if he had died in her absence, I don't think it would have affected her that way. But I just think it's a horrible thing to see. And
she feels guilty. She says, like, is it my fault for wishing it?
But I think that's just a very immediate response and just being confused about what the fuck just happened.
And with it, she also knows that, or at least thinks that the poison was from her hairnet. So, as well, I think she's taking some of the blame herself.
Mm-hmm.
She knows she's in trouble when she gets to the God's Wood, basically.
Right. But I also think that I don't think she'd be upset about that in the foreseeable future. It's just this weird first moment of trying to process what on earth just happened.
Well, let's face it.
And also, she's really young, and she also hasn't. I think we as readers get very desensitized to death, and I'm sure a lot of people in that world do as well if they've been through battles and stuff. But she is very young. Has she seen people die? She must have seen
Ned.
Yeah, she's seen Ned die.
Oh,
but
yeah,
she hasn't
Ned.
seen. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. But she hasn't. But she hasn't seen a lot of death yet. She's experienced a lot of death, as in like her family died, but she wasn't around to see it. So.
Absolutely. And you know what? I really, really hope that Sansa took that hairnet with her to the Vale and uses it on Littlefinger.
Yes, definitely.
So much.
Do you think all the gems are poisoned?
No, I figured it was just that one.
No, but it
How
would
would
be
Leto
if
know?
all of them were, because there's no guarantee that unless they automatically knew which one was poisoned. And
Yeah.
Well, maybe one of them was.
It'd be safer for all of them to be
Yeah, there's no way it was just one of them.
Well, but here's the thing, okay? If it was all of them, wouldn't that be leaving massive evidence behind?
No, not at all.
No
You
one
see
would
how
expect
easily
it.
she got away with it.
Well, she did, but she might not have.
Yeah,
I also think that was a deliberate bit that Littlefinger suggested as a safety net for the Tyrells. So if the trial starts to go against them and people start accusing the Tyrells, they could always be like, oh my god, look at Sansa, look at her hairnet, oh my god, evidence.
True.
Yeah.
And then you can prove that it is poisoned if you have more than one. Like, you can prove it. Chemistry. But yeah.
I mean, they have alchemy, they don't have chemistry quite yet.
Yeah.
They give a glass of wine to a
Same
servant, and they're like, drink this. Nothing bad will happen.
No, but they could just dissolve it into some water and have Maester Pycelle look at it. Possibly, or just give it to Maester Pycelle and he'd be dying and be like, yep, that's it. Oh my god. Ugh.
I think we joke, but I think that that's actually what would have happened. They would have fed it. They would have fed it to some, commoner who died. I mean,
or someone who'd like killed someone else and is just like, drink it. Or they'd give it to Tyrion and be like, here you go, drink it.
I mean, that's what kings and people used to do, right? Like kings and like important people used to have someone
a taster,
taste their meals, like in real history. So it's not that far fetched.
Jaime does that for Tommen.
Oh yeah, and one of the King's Guards does it.
Sir Boros Blount.
Boros Blount, yeah.
It does seem like a weird thing for the King's Guard to be doing. I mean, I can see the logic behind them being supposed to protect the king.
Because he was fat.
They should.
But it also seems like a bit of a waste, because you could use like a random commoner for that, and you wouldn't have to risk the life of it.
It's done as an insult. I think Jaime deliberately tries to insult Boros by making him the food taster.
It absolutely, because the whole reason is because he's like fat or whatever, or chubby or something, so
and he like fight well.
Yeah, exactly. So he deliberately insults him by making him the king's food tester.
Isn't that bad though? Because wouldn't it be better to have someone who's a similar weight as the person you're tasting for, so you get a better idea of how it'll affect them?
But
this way
he's more trying to replace Boros Blount.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think they had that much of an understanding of chemistry at that point.
Fair enough.
One thing I thought was really interesting here is that given that George has left so many mysteries dangling for so long, I mean, if you think about it, in the first book, Game of Thrones, the two big mysteries were what? I mean, who killed Jon Arryn and who tried to kill Bran, right? We just got sort of our confirmation on the Bran one a few minutes ago, and we still haven't gotten confirmation of the other one, although it's coming once Sansa gets to, to the Eyrie. Yet he reveals pretty much Joffrey's killer immediately, or at least, that Littlefinger's behind it in the next chapter, which I thought was really interesting that he decided to make such a major revelation. And if you think about it,
gives some legitimacy to Jock's theories that there is the possibility that he just took credit for it. He was like, oh, this happened. Oh, yeah, sure, that was totally me. Yeah, I planned that.
Yeah.
Which is possible.
With this, with Littlefinger going away, he's the one who chose to go away to the Eyrie so early, because Mace asked him, what now? You're going to miss the king's wedding. And Littlefinger says the tide waits for no man. Because they also have the storms coming in with autumn.
Right.
So he's the one who chose when he was leaving.
I think with the purple wedding, you need to know the motives for it. Unlike Jon Arryn's death and Bran's assassination, those are the mysteries that draw you into the initial story. Mm-hmm. But here, the motives are just as important as the action itself.
Yes.
Although interestingly,
why would it happen?
Yeah.
Although interestingly, the motive we get from Littlefinger is that there is no motive. I just want to create chaos. Whereas clearly, that's not. That's not a motive. That's not a
motive.
I'll tell you what he gets out of it. Tyrion is accused of murder. Sansa is whisked away, and in a way that she's super dependent on Littlefinger. And then Joffrey is too much chaos, because Littlefinger wants 3 or 4 years of peace to plant seeds and do stuff. So that's basically what Littlefinger gets out of it.
And as well, yes, he gets Sansa, but he also probably didn't like how Joffrey treated Sansa, so it might also be a little bit of revenge by killing him.
Maybe.
Sansa to empathize with her in that way. Maybe. I don't know.
It's hard to say because he's messed up about his feelings about her and Catelyn, but
could he also be super pissed off because Catelyn has just died and he knows it was the Lannisters behind it, so it might be a bit of
revenge.
Yeah, in that way as well.
Well, and the Purple Wedding was planned months and months ago, so that would be sort of retroactive. Sort of, he only finds out about the Red Wedding 2 weeks ago.
Well, are we sure about this though? I mean, do we have any evidence that the murder at least was planned even before yesterday? I mean, I'm sure it was, but do we have any evidence of that?
I think Littlefinger himself mentions that when he was at Highgarden, he brought this up with Olenna, and that's where they initially planned the murder of Joffrey.
Okay.
But it's not outright stated. I think it's just implied and discussed.
Although everything is. You know, this is really the first time we get a real sense of how. I mean, I guess we saw Littlefinger behind the scenes in the first book, but I mean, since then, this is the first sense we get of how much of a player he is in this game, isn't it? I mean, we really get how much behind he is of everything, and then we're going to get more later in the Eyrie when we find out that he was behind all the stuff with Lysa and Jon Arryn. But we're really getting a big sense of what a player he is here. I mean, in some ways you could say this chapter is as important and as big as the one before it, in the Revelations.
It is in a weird way, yes. Oh, you know, the old, I'm putting in quotes, old man that rows Dontos and Sansa across to the ship that Littlefinger's on. Mm-hmm. His name's Oswell, and like I think he actually might be a Kettle Black because you have Oswell Kettle Black. Like he definitely is. Right,
he is. Right? It comes up later, which I mentioned that in my summary that it does come up later, but we don't know it yet.
And Sansa thinks he looks familiar, so I thought it was kind of funny. I'm like, nah, Kettle Blacks. But... Yep. Too bad, Cersei, you can't screw this one.
Right. Speaking of Dontos, what do you think his primary motivation here was? Do you think he was really trying to return the favor to Sansa? Do you think he has that weird obsession, the Florian Jonquil thing? Or was it just the money, or all three?
Money for booze.
I think it's all of it, but mostly the money.
Yeah. And then
I think it's a bit of all of it, but
do you think if he hadn't offered him money, do you think he would have done it?
Nope.
Probably not. It's too risky, and Dontos knows it's too risky.
But at the same time, he has no life now. He's just going to be a fool. And, you know, this is the woman who saved him, and he does have that weird love fetishy thing that's weird. So I wonder if he would have. I think he might have.
I mean, there is this massive psychological effect of people just trying to justify their actions in whatever way, and I think he did it 100% for the money, but I think he realized it would be nobler if he had other reasons to do it. So he kind of talked himself into having other reasons when it was really primarily the money. But it just made him feel better about himself to feel. If you asked him, he'd probably say the money was not that important. But.
Right.
He needed to have a reason to tell Sansa to get Sansa to trust him as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it wasn't his motivation, but I think it made the whole thing work. And that it just kind of provided the circumstances to make it even possible.
And then he believes his own lies at the end.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot like Littlefinger.
Yeah.
Gross. So gross. So gross.
Question. Do you know the bloody cloak theory, which is it has to do with Sansa's cloak that she's wearing now?
I know it exists, but I can't remember it. Can you please remind us?
Okay, so this one was written by Lady Gwen from Radio Westeros and Milady of York. Okay. And apparently it had been discussed on Pawn to Player Rethinking Sansa threads. So the thing about it is, with this cloak, it's a massive green cloak with a very, very large hood. So the theory behind this is that it's actually Sandor's cloak that he left with her at the Battle of the Blackwater. And because it was bloody and blood's a very hard stain to get out, she actually dyed it green, and she would have had access to the green dyes because she's been sewing and embroidering a lot with the Tyrells, and green's the Tyrell colour, so it would actually be very easy to do. And Sansa's done this on a different occasion because when in book 1, when Arya and Sansa have a fight, Arya throws a blood orange at Sansa and it stains her dress and she dyes it black, and she wears that dress on another occasion and she mentions that it's the dress that happened then.
I could buy it.
I think that's a little shipping. I think
It's
there's just a
It's
little.
a very minor theory. It's not like, oh, Sansa killed someone with this cloak. It's just
Right,
like, yeah, she just dyed a cloak a color. So yeah.
No,
I like
actually-
I like
It's a
small
sweet
theories.
theory.
It's a little shippy, just a little
Yeah.
shippy.
Hey, I like
A
this
little.
ship. Don't judge it too much, okay?
That's why I said it, just to be fun.
No, I actually remember reading that theory, and like, even if it is a little shippy, like it totally fits with Sansa's character, and it's just a nice little thing that you could totally see George putting into the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And that way she still gets to keep the cloak that Sandor gave her. And
we know
he
she
was her
kept it too.
protector. Yeah. It's sweet. Okay? It's sweet. But yeah.
Confirmed.
Yes, confirmed. And
It is known.
It is
it is known. And yeah, one of the reasons actually why she chose the green cloak is because in a Game of Thrones, one of the occasions where we see Sandor not in like the King's Guard clothing, he wears an olive green cloak and it's his soot grey armor, but olive green and brown are clothes that he wears quite often when he's not in the white cloak. So yeah.
I totally missed that. There's a lot of fashion that I miss when I read these books.
Yeah, this is not a book. This is a book about fashion and food. Let's be honest.
Well, we do know that Sansa's wearing a brown dress with freshwater pearls on it because she was told to dress plainly, and that's totally plain. Like, really, really plain.
1% problems. This is the poorest dress I have.
No, but she was told to dress plainly and hide her clothing because she hid it 2 days ago. Why didn't she just take all of the pearls off it? Like, that's what I would have done because she knows how to sew. Just take the pearls off.
That sounds like it would have been a good idea. And doesn't
It
take
would
that
have
much
ruined
skill,
the
does it?
dress, though.
No,
The pearls made the dress,
She
you know?
needs the dress. She needs the dress.
the pearls make it so everyone's going to know who the fuck she is. Like, silly. Silly.
Priorities. I wouldn't ruin any of my dresses. So I get it.
And we are talking Sansa here, you know. I mean, she's not
I think,
exactly this. She's not
She
exactly
could've kept
planned and
them.
scheming, you know.
I think I care less about my dresses than Sansa does, and I wouldn't do that.
No, I would,
There
because
you
otherwise
go.
you get caught because of it. She could have kept the pearls and then sewed them back on later, but like,
Or
See,
she'll
the
be
thing is-
caught looking fabulous.
Right,
my god.
and that's
She'll be
important.
caught looking fabulous and be put to death. Yeah.
But she'll still look
Priorities. Yeah. That's, I mean, yeah.
See, I would totally just cut it off. I'd be like, get those pearls off, okay? Like, so hard. But, I don't know. I guess, wait,
You'd be a
Tanja,
better.
do you do any sewing or, like, crafting stuff? Because, like, would you know how to... Sorry?
No, I give it to my mum.
Yeah. That might be why, because...
But I can't. No, I do do a bit of crafty stuff. I have a sewing machine, but the sewing machine doesn't live in the same country as me. So,
So, like,
it's very
so you
difficult.
know how to do it, but you just...
I'd figure it out. No, I mean, I see your point about like holding on to the pearls and putting them on later. I could,
Yeah, or whether she'd
maybe
sell
I
them
could-
later, like
maybe
take your
I could-
jewelry and then
Let's be
sell it
honest.
later.
No.
We're talking about Sansa. She's not exactly like experienced in conspiracy and you know this stuff. I mean,
she's
it's
getting
still-
there, but she's
getting there, but she's not there yet.
It's okay.
You sound really desperate. I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I just really like all my dresses. I'd be worried I'd damage something.
Man, like, even if... Oh. Okay.
The boys don't have much to say about this.
Sorry,
boys
boys.
boys can
But,
sew.
like, what if it was a nice top that you guys owned and you needed to get away somewhere? Say if it had, like, glow-in-the-dark
Would
stuff
you-
on it.
would you
rip that off?
would you take your favorite band's logo off your favorite band T-shirt?
But that's impossible unless you leave a massive hole in it.
Yeah, you can't really do that. It doesn't work with t-shirts.
But yeah, I don't know. Or, like, a button-down top.
Take the buttons off.
Yeah, take the buttons off and put press studs in or something like that. Would you do it, or would you just be like, eh?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I was just going to say.
I think that's actually my main point. I would probably just not bother.
You know, you gotta love Vok. I mean, we have two of the most eventful chapters in the entire books, and we're talking about, like, the pearls on Sansa's dress. I love it.
I'm sorry, but it annoys me.
No, it's
okay?
great. No, it's funny. That's us. That's us in a nutshell, right?
By the way, can I also talk about what Dontos is wearing? Kind of annoys me for logistical reasons as well.
Food and fashion. Food and fashion.
Welcome to Fashion
Food and
Cast.
fashion. Food and fashion cast.
So Dontos is wearing his night surcoat,
Yep.
so it's his house colors, and it's like pink and red. And I think he's had gold as
like
well.
A terrible color combination.
It's terrible sneaking clothes, and he's
Exactly.
the one
I
who
was
told
thinking
Zander
that.
to dress dark and plain, and I'm like,
Yep.
what the fuck are you wearing?
Let me wear this pink and red. It's crazy shit. Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
I
Whereas
get
one-
it.
But he's
His
a
last
fool.
one-
Reasons, but at least he died at night rather than dying in his.
And more importantly, as we were saying before, he looked fabulous when he died.
Are you saying, Sarah? Are you saying he deserved to die because he didn't dress adequately?
No,
Fashion-
because it was
fashion
little who
police.
killed him and knew he'd be coming anyway. Okay.
Fashion police.
But I mean, like, if they were caught along the way and it's because of what they were wearing, I'd be like, it's your own fault, okay?
The two of them.
Should have done better.
Do you think Littlefinger wasn't going to kill him, but then he was like, oh, dude, you look ridiculous. This can't.
Littlefinger is the fashion police of Westeros.
I think that's what really happened here. That's my crackpot theory for the day.
It is known. It is known.
Littlefinger only kills people who don't dress appropriately.
It is known.
What was Joffrey wearing at his wedding?
Samite. I remember crimson samite.
Maybe
Black
Littlefinger was
onyx.
like, nope. Maybe
Marjorie
Littlefinger
was
like,
wearing pale green
nope.
samite at the actual feast.
Maybe Littlefinger wasn't on board with that. Maybe he would have survived if he dressed differently.
Is this why you want to know what colours he's wearing?
Ned wasn't known for his fashion sense either.
True.
Yeah.
No.
For them, they knew what he was doing, so I don't see why he died.
Yeah, true. But I guess Littlefinger didn't kill him. So.
Right. Littlefinger didn't want him dead, though.
Yeah,
He just-
Littlefinger only kills
he just
people who
want-
don't dress well.
He only wanted him sent up to the wall and out of the way so he could get Catelyn.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she'd still be married, so I doubt she'd go for him.
I think in the back of Littlefinger's mind, he was always open to the idea of Catelyn being like, "Oh, Peter, I was wrong about you all these years. Let's get married again somehow." Like, there's no way to.
I don't think that's at the back of his mind. I think that's his hopes and dreams.
That's the
Yeah,
front of
I'm
his
sure it
mind.
is.
That wasn't the back of his mind. That was the front of his mind. Come
Well,
on.
I think on the front of his mind is Sansa. Like, he's moving on to, project number 2.
Right now.
So gross.
Come
That's
on.
the reason why he's doing everything. And actually, project number
Yeah,
3.
Junior.
Number 2 was Liza.
No, he didn't. No, he never wanted Liza. Liza was just a pawn.
Yeah.
Liza was the holdover. Liza was I can't get Kat and I can't get Sansa right now because she doesn't exist, so fine, I'll go to you. Mew, mew,
Wait.
mew, mew, mew.
Do we think he had any actual interest in Liza? I think Liza was
No.
just a pawn in his
Yeah.
games.
Like, no interest
Yeah.
beyond any usefulness.
I mean, we haven't gotten to that chapter yet, but only Cat. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes. Only Kat. And
and
now Kat's daughter,
Cat-
who's supposedly more beautiful than Kat is, so
right.
yeah, that's great. Fucking great.
That's so gross.
Or as I said, ew.
Yes.
And just to make it sad at the end, Littlefinger tells Sansa that she's going home, and I'm sure she thinks that means Winterfell,
Of course she does.
but no, home to me.
He didn't have to say that. I mean, I don't know. He's so smart and
He
knows
could
so
have
much
said
stuff. But sorry.
Sorry.
I think it makes sense in his head. I think he thinks he's taking her home and doing a favor, and she'd want that as well. I think he's convinced himself of that. And I think when he says we're going home, He means it in a way that he perceives to be positive. And I don't think he realizes that he's sort of like leaving her on or lying to her. I don't think he sees it that way. He definitely is, and he's a creep and very gross.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, right, I mean, the entire conversation, if you're really wanting to, like, move in on this girl, I mean, what part of this conversation...
banged your mom.
Like, exactly. Like, what part of this conversation would be effective? A, I banged your mom. B, I took her cherry. C, I loved her. And G, I wish you were my daughter. Like, what part of that is going to be an effective way to seduce a woman?
None of those things would be.
Right.
With it, I think this is where we start seeing Littlefinger think of Sansa more as his daughter, because he's saying
daughter wife,
like, because he's like, not necessarily as a wife but more of as a daughter, so taking her home, if he's thinking about Sansa as being his daughter, it does make a bit more sense. But with it, why the hell doesn't he just say, I'm going to take you to your family, and yes, that is true, you might be raising her expectations, but it's the truth, and you're taking her to Littlefinger and Robin. No, not Littlefinger, Lysa and Robin.
Lysa, yeah.
But yeah.
And on some level, that's all the family she has left, as far as everyone knows. So.
Yeah, so technically correct.
Yeah, not lying at all.
White lies. Bad song reference.
Does anybody have any other weird points for this chapter? Specifically weird. If it's normal, I don't want to hear it. Okay.
Preferably fashion related, or maybe food.
Or disgusting.
Yeah, there's no food in this chapter.
I'd just like to point out that while the plan to get Sansa out of King's Landing did go off without a hitch, there were a lot of ways that this could have gone wrong. Like, instead of Sansa running out with Lady Tanja, if she runs out with, like, Adam Marbrand, and then he grabs her by the wrist and drags her back into the throne room, she's dead. So, like, Littlefinger was taking a pretty big risk here. You know, he didn't just want to get Sansa out. He wanted Sansa out in a way that she was now dependent on Littlefinger for safety. So, yeah.
I guess we don't know if he had any backup plans or any other failed saves put in place or something. We don't know.
I mean, what if she had plans?
The Kettle Blacks were meant to get her out or something like that, or Dontos was supposed to get her out?
Dontos was.
Like, something like that?
But, of course, I mean, the moment it went down, they could have, like, kept everyone inside, or they could have at least kept them, or kept an eye.
They should have put the whole thing on a lockdown.
They should have locked down. Prince choking, lockdown. Bye.
Right. And especially, though, the moment that they arrested Tyrion, what if Sansa hadn't run so quickly? Yeah. You know, they would have grabbed her, too. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, he really should have told her about this plan so she knows when she has to get out.
Yep.
You know,
or have someone there being ready to pull her out.
Right. Someone there to whisper in her ear, let's go.
Yes.
I mean, in a lot of ways, the plan shouldn't have worked, but it did, so.
It worked because George needed it to work.
I mean, right, it's true. Plot armor.
Good point.
Plot armor.
Yes.
Of course,
Sansa
Tyrion ends up as the cupbearer because that makes him the most guilty looking. You know, it goes exactly right.
See, this is why Tyrion should have had Shay there, and then he could have just given the goddamn chalice to Shay and be like, there you go, sign your death warrant, bye.
Except he loves her. He can't do that.
Yeah, he never would have done that, even if she'd been out.
No way.
He's such a creep. Sorry. But this last chapter, Tyrion 8, really does hammer home how much of a creep he is. Like,
I don't know.
No, because he sees Sansa and Shay together, and he thinks that they look like sadness and laughter, and like draws that parallel. And it's like,
hey, the funny whore.
Yeah, damn funny. It's not like she's the one who's going to sign your death certificate or anything.
I don't know. I didn't get that feeling from Tyrion. I mean, later, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's always a little creepy in him, and on some level you can't blame him. He's like every other character we sympathize with. There's, he's in a bad position and doing the best he can, but he's also drunk as fuck. We have to remember that. So that kind of shades his point of view.
You're also going to have a very different perception of this than we will.
Right. It's true.
So
And being this with a reread as well, you're also have to factor in everything that happens in the other books.
Exactly.
That you're reading it from that perspective as well.
Right.
But, man, I think the reason why I don't really like him in these scenes is because he is so drunk. Like,
right.
He is slobbering drunk. Like, fucking drunk. And he didn't keep a lid on it, or because he's really is just throwing them back the whole day.
Yeah, it's how mentally damaged he is, or an indication. And in fact, in A Dance with Dragons, he starts going through alcohol withdrawal symptoms when he gets deprived of wine. Like, he gets the shakes and everything. So, like, it's almost played for laughs. Not really laughs, but it's viewed definitely in a different light in A Storm of Swords. And then in A Dance with Dragons, it takes on quite a different tone.
Right, much darker.
Yeah.
What else happens in this chapter? I'm trying to remember. Like, Sansa gets away. Littlefinger kills Dontos.
I mean, it's a short chapter.
Dressed appropriately.
It's only 6 pages or so, or depending on which version you have. But it's not that. I read it on an ebook, so it was only 6. But it's like half the. It's a pretty short chapter.
It's a very short chapter.
Yeah, pretty to the point.
I mean, pretty much she gets away, and then Littlefinger gets creepy, and Dontos gets killed, and those are the major things that happen.
Hey, sorry, I'm looking at how old they are. So in a Game of Thrones, Tyrion's 25 and Sansa's 12, so there's like a 13-year age gap.
Right. He's twice her age.
Yeah, but to be honest, that's an awful lot better than what Lysa got with John Arryn.
True.
Yeah, it was like a 40-year difference at least.
But how old was she at the time?
16? 17?
I mean, it's gross either way, but...
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, obviously, the older you are, the less the age difference matters. But then 16 and 50 is
right. Though to be fair, Tyrion didn't want this in any way. At any point, he never wanted this. So
in his defense, that is true.
No, but he doesn't refuse it.
Yeah, and he still
have that
he still has very inappropriate and uncomfortable thoughts and feelings towards it.
Absolutely. But then again, he still doesn't go through with any of them. So you got to give him at least a little.
I don't think we're setting standards high enough if we're saying, oh, he's not a rapist. He's such a fantastic guy. Brilliant. This is all I need to make a positive judgment about someone's character. That is not.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I agree with you, but we do have to remember that he lives in a different world than we do now. And in that world, having sex with your wife is not rape. And in no way in that world would that ever be seen that. Now, we don't live in that world, and we obviously think that, and anyone who doesn't is creepy and criminal. But in that world, I mean, not only is it not rape to screw your wife, you're required to. I mean, the entire ceremony has this whole bedding thing.
I mean, you're right. You are right in that respect, and I'm willing to give you some amount of credit for.
But I mean, even in America, marital rape wasn't like illegal until the last, 60 years.
Right.
So just because something isn't illegal doesn't mean it's okay. But
right.
It raises questions of what is inherently a good thing.
Right. But I think you have to understand, though, that when you grow up in a world where everyone thinks these things, then you're going to think these things. And it sounds...
No, I do think he's very much a victim of the circumstances, and I do think he given the circumstances and the larger context of the world he lives in, I think he's handling this reasonably well. But I mean, we can't be creeped out by it.
Exactly. I'm not saying it's not creepy, but I mean, in his world, he wouldn't even think that it's wrong. And in fact,
of course,
I mean, you could argue that the fact that he doesn't sleep with her is actually violating his duty to his family and to God.
That is true in a sense, yeah.
And it is. He's really he's committing a crime, really, by not doing this. Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's a crime. But
he's not consummating his marriage, right? That's not a crime.
Yeah, it means that
it has legal ramifications.
But you're supposed to. I mean, they're not really married. I mean, by their definition, they're not even married because you're not married if you haven't consummated.
Yeah. Actually, isn't that even now? If you haven't consummated it, it's you can get it annulled
rather than divorced. Yeah.
It seems none of anyone's business.
I agree.
But it's more Like, wasn't it as well back in the old days? You could get like a divorce if you hadn't consummated it yet, but it wouldn't be a divorce. It'd be just annulment before they started doing divorces, or divorces became more common.
Yeah.
Same as, isn't it as well that if you couldn't have children, or one of you couldn't have children, that was also a reason for separation, like something like that.
But I mean, I think George is even like playing on probably all of those by setting up something for Sansa to be able to either get an annulment or like it not be considered an actual marriage in future books, you know.
Yeah, I do think that matters. I do think we'll come back to that. So.
Right.
Yeah, I do think that's what's going to make it so she can marry again.
Right.
I would be happy if she didn't marry anyone throughout the series and she ends off like she gets to choose in the next 10 years who she marries. Yeah.
I consider that a very unlikely outcome. I would like, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
I think she's going to end the series as like a virgin, like still single.
I like that idea though, because her story arc has been going from romantic partner pretty much through to romantic partner. So it's been Joffrey, she's had her eyes on Loras, Tyrion, Sandor, like all of the main men in her life she's either had a romantic interest in or they've had a romantic interest in her, apart from Ned, but like everyone else has.
Yeah,
you missed out with
interesting to see her develop as a solitary character.
I'd like her to, at least if she doesn't get married, I'd like her to hook up with someone she wants to hook up with.
Yeah.
As long as it's consensual.
Yes, consensual hookup is okay. Non-consensual, no. Bye.
I really want that for her. Feel free to edit this out, but I think George is a bit of a creep as much as I like these books.
I agree.
I think he's gross. And I think he writes some really gross stuff.
He does.
Has some really horrible attitudes towards women.
Absolutely.
When
not be surprised at all.
Dany's first chapter, I started reading it and I put it down and I didn't pick it up again for a month because I hated how he portrayed the relationship between Viserys and Dany with what he does to her in the bath scene. Right. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it is. I thought the same. It was just really creepy.
And it gets justified as serving the narrative or whatever, but that is not always true. And
that wasn't needed. It wasn't needed.
And every time you think something is really gross and Tyrion thinks something really gross or whatever, there's a writer behind this. And I feel like you can tell to some extent when like, you can write characters that have opinions that don't reflect your own, and you can write creepy, gross characters without necessarily being creepy and gross. But I think you can tell to some extent when an author condones their characters' attitudes and when they don't. And I feel like there are many, many places in these books where George is definitely on the wrong side of things.
Well, I think also you do have to remember that, I mean, the guy's, 67 now? Or just 68, he just had a birthday.
Yeah, but I don't care.
And I'm not saying it's okay. I just remember what we said about that world is that when you grow up in a different world, a lot of the things we think of today as, are not things that people even 30 years ago think about. When we talk about... Oh, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying you do have to look in that perspective. Like the gay stuff in the books is all weird. I mean, we have whenever there's like gay men in there, it's subtle and you have to really read between the lines, but then we can have the women like doing it because, hey, they're women and they're hot. I mean, it's like a lot of this is really, I mean, George is an old man who grew up, before any of us did, and he has some weird issues around sexuality that a lot of people did, and luckily we live in a time when we understand how creepy a lot of that shit is,
Yeah, but like, I mean, like for me, like the main thing with that is always the scene where Jaime rapes Cersei, which is just 100% unambiguous in the books, and there's no argument to be had about that.
Trust me, there's lots of arguments that have been had over it. But
well, yeah,
I agree with you.
If you think rape is okay, then you can certainly argue that. But
right.
but I mean, I don't know, there's no sensible argument to be had about this, and the way he's talked about this in interviews makes it plain clear that he didn't intend for this to be rape, but he wrote it as rape. That is how he wrote it, and the fact that he doesn't perceive this to be rape, even though he wrote it, and he wrote her verbally and physically refusing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, yeah, no, that wasn't meant to be rape.
Definitely. And
super gross.
And as well, it's not just in a Game of Thrones that idea is being perpetuated, because I saw a thing recently, and it was talking about James Bond, because he does force himself on women, as in the Daniel Craig James Bond, in one of the more recent ones, and he killed this woman's wife, and then he goes to her home and he forces himself on her, and she's saying no and is pushing him away, and he continues.
Mm-hmm.
And then she, in theory, accepts it, but she never says yes or like, let's do it. It's just, it's being perpetuated in so many different types of media, and it's not being addressed that it is rape.
If you're persistent enough with sexually harassing or sexually assaulting a woman, she's eventually going to be into it. So.
And and that was a lot of the stuff. I mean, remember, I'm a little older than a lot of you, but I mean, 30 years ago, that's what you saw in movies. That's what you saw on TV.
That
and
is
it's
what
awful.
you still see in movies on TV.
And you still, but you saw it. You saw it way more, though. At least now, like, people have a concept that this isn't okay. Whereas, like, no one would even think that it wasn't okay 30 years ago. Like, a few of us did. I thought it wasn't okay, but not everyone does. I mean, we can only be glad that the world is slowly evolving and getting better. Not fast enough for sure, but we're getting there.
But at least, hopefully, if we talk about things like this, it starts a discussion so things can change.
Exactly. The only way you deal with uncomfortable issues is to deal with them.
Yes.
True.
A shadow baby needs no intro. She arrives precisely when she means to.
Perfect intro.
Hey, it's Hannah, shadow baby on the forums.
There we go. I was going to say, Tanya, just so you're aware, I'm not trying to justify anything any of these characters do. I think it's as creepy as you. I'm just saying that, like, in the world we're in, I mean, like, I'm a gay guy, and I think the homosexuality shit in these books is creepy as fuck, but he's a 67-year-old man.
No, I know what you mean. I think it's worth considering both those perspectives. I think we should talk about how gross and creepy it is, but I think we can also talk about how it makes some amount of sense in the context of Martin's time. I don't know.
Right. And the books did come out like 15 years ago, which, again,
that is also true, yeah.
As much as say, we should know better, people didn't know better 20 years ago. I'm older than you all, and I know, like, the things I heard people say, I mean, even today, of course, but I mean, 20 years ago, it was common. 20 years ago, this is what you think. I mean, 20 years ago, the idea of, like, women stars of a TV show would be shocking. You didn't do that,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm reading a lot of Asimov at the moment, and it's really hard because I really like Asimov, but then he's also explicitly stated that women don't have a place in science fiction, and the more women are present in any of his books, the more sexist the books generally are.
Right.
Because at least if there's no women, there's nothing against them. But as soon as there's a woman around, she's very grossly objectified. And I still read the books. I still like them. I wouldn't, if they came out today, I wouldn't find that acceptable. And I still find it awful, and I'm still complaining about it. But it's worth, like looking at stuff in the context of that time. So.
Right.
With this, it's also why reading, I think, female authors is also very good, because that way you see them from a different perspective. Like, it's same as with movies. So if you have a male director, the gaze on your female is very, very different compared to if it's with a female director. Right. How they shoot women is very different, because one will be with a sexual gaze most of the time, and the other one isn't. It's
Yeah. Also, everyone should read Joel Corner's books, because he has fantastic characters. gay protagonist.
There you go. And it's like, the Bechdel test, if you got, how often do you have a woman on screen not talking about men? Or two women on a screen talking to each other, not about men.
That are named characters.
Right. You never see that, in so many. And we have to, as much as we get frustrated with as awful as the world is today and was 10 years ago, we're making progress. So you have to, it's frustrating.
I think it's still important to have these conversations. For example, one thing. So I love Tolkien more than anything. I walked around Oxford with a beard last week. Tolkien Society meetup, as you do. And he obviously, there's not too many women in his books, and there's debates quite regularly about. Yeah. And there's debates quite regularly about whether he was sexist or not. And then there are people who want to immediately... So I love his work, I absolutely do.
Right.
But there's people who just want to shut all of these debates down immediately and say, well, it's a different time and so on. It's not really worth talking about this. And I agree that it's not worth throwing these books away and saying they're not we should. It's not like that those books aren't worth reading because of those things. But I also think we can still, even though we can keep in mind the time they were written at and still critically examine them from today's perspective.
Absolutely.
And I think that's you in both of that. And those conversations.
Well, we do that with George. We do that with Martin's work anyway, and it's a fairly contemporary work.
Yeah.
I'm constantly criticizing it from, yes, it's a fantasy world, but those times, you know what I mean, compared to today. And there is no basis for comparison, except for, Bean and I were discussing this last time we talked, that is the only place that I can have any perspective on it from, because I've never lived in medieval times or a feudal system.
Yeah.
So I can try to empathize, but really that's not going to be the reality.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we can still, I think these discussions are helpful, and I think they're good, and, and if it makes all of us think a little more about it, and all our listeners, that's a great thing, That said, I don't think obviously any of us are dismissing it either, because we're on this damn podcast.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, we're not only reading the books, we're rereading them and talking about them.
I mean, I'm happy with the discussions we had about these topics today. I feel like they were sufficiently well-rounded. So.
I just wanted to make sure you didn't think that I was, defending him.
No, not at all, no.
So thank you for listening to this episode of Vassals of Kingsgrave. So you can find Vassals of Kingsgrave on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Tumblr. The forums are at Podcast of Ice and Fire forums.
Tumblr,
you
really?
can Google it. Yeah, apparently. I don't know. Oh, I'm not a Tumblr person.
Neither am I.
Interesting. I don't know. So the forums are at Podcast of Ice and Fire forums. You can Google it. It'll show up right away. But in saying that, you need to be a member to actually read what's on the forums.
But anyone can just sign up. So sign up.
Yeah, you can sign up. It's free. It's really easy. Sign up and you get to talk to us.
Yeah.
And you can tell us what you think about this episode.
You don't have to talk
and it's a lot of
sign
fun.
up anyway.
It is a lot of fun. And then you can join on podcasts and everything else. It's so much fun. And so next episode is episode 54, and that's being hosted by Marie, aka Nymeria, on the forums.
Do we get our first Dance of Dragons chapter next episode?
Yes,
we do.
Next episode is the first Dance of Dragons.
That's exciting.
Ooh, it's exciting.
It's a Daenerys one.
When do we get the first Winds chapter?
Of course, it's Daenerys.
Don't ask me when we get that.
Sorry.
I don't know.
When we get the book, probably.
Which will be who knows when.
Yes. Okay. Scroll down.
Yay, we did it.
Yeah.
I'm going through the ultimate Google Doc. Okay, so Marie's hosting the next one, and it's Davos 6, which is Edric escaping, and the news of the Purple Wedding, Dany 1, so first ever Dance with Dragons chapter, exciting, and then Bran 4, which is at the Night Fort. There you go. Cool. And that's from the 4th of January. There you go. Thank you for listening, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to Fashion Cast and Ew Cast.
Do we want to get started now?
Nah.
You'll just stay there and still be asleep.
Yeah.
Food and fashion.
They should do a wit and wisdom of, I don't know, Tyrell.
Right.
Yes.
I would buy that.
It's like the life of times of Olenna Tyrell, and you get her scathing remarks the whole way through.
I'd be so into that.
I know.
But like in the
George?
style of a tabloid.
There you go.
Not even a tabloid. I'd kind of like to see it as a little, like, novel. So George, instead of writing, like, Duncan Egg, write Lady Olenna.
Do not encourage George to write anything that is not
Anything else.
Edit this out. This can't. Don't give him any ideas.
I highly doubt he listens to us.
I'm sure he does. What
Oh,
else
he
could he
does.
possibly be doing?
It's not like he's writing Winds of Winter.
Yeah.
Aren't
Say
they?
the funny whore.
Yeah, Cersei's just a... We need a whole Cersei podcast. She's
Didn't
such
we
a
already have a
complex...
I'd
Cersei
find that-
podcast?
We have one.
It's
Okay.
another Cersei
Oh, that's right, we did.
podcast.
We
It's
could
about
use
part
do
2.
like 3 more. We could do like 3 more.
Yeah.
Just
I
like
find that
a
interesting.
Cersei podcast of this book, a Cersei podcast of the next book.
I mean, you could do a whole series on her.
Yeah,
Okay.
or actually
Spin-off.
Very
That'll be
much.
one of
And
the
then-
one of the spin-off shows.
do it with how she develops as a character. Start with book 1, and then you go through how she's changed through all of the books, and with everything that's happened. Could be interesting. Character analysis.
So maybe we should do a character analysis reread on Cersei.
Yes. Could be very interesting.
It's a lot of reading.
When we've done the
Yep.
linear reread.
Yeah, let's
and-
finish this one first.
And Winds of Winter is in no near future. And we're like,
And we'll
well,
just
what
go
else
through
can we do?
character by character.
Yes,
I know.
character by character, and then we list... How would we even try to order that? Like, our favourite characters first, or our least favourite characters first? Or, like, the most interesting to least interesting?
Whatever, random.
Maybe just in order of introduction.
Yeah, could do.
Maybe. But the Starks? Then it would be all the Starks first, and, like, all of their
True.
introductions are so similar.
Very true.
Whatever, we've got some amount of time before we're done with this.
Yeah, we
I
can
mean,
cross
we're
that
getting a
bridge.
pretty
I know.
good
Which
speed,
we
so
may
we'll get
have
there,
to.
but
We may have to.
We
By the way-
will, we will, but not yet.
Aren't they?
funny whore.
Oh no, I was gonna tell you, read Robin Hobb. Like, not necessarily the Farseer trilogy, but if you read the, like, Live Ship Traders ones,
Okay.
those are very good. Or,
Great, thanks. I will. I'm reading Asimov, so I get angry a lot.
No, it's because they have a good combination of, like, men and females, and it's good to see women in power in it. But yeah,
Everyone should read Joel Cornar's books, because he has lots of fantastic female characters, and gender is much... It makes me much less angry in his books. New author. Very, very good. Joel Cornar. Don't edit this out, this is very important.
Joel Corner with an N
Yeah.
or Cormer with an M.
N-G-O... I'm too tired to spell. G-O-E-L-C-O-R-N-A, possibly. Sometime. Yeah,
Okay.
it's good books that don't make me angry at men all the time.
Okay. I'll check it out, or try to. Okay.
Yes, please. Don't edit it out. This is very important. Everyone needs to know this.
Aren't they?
funny whore. Thanks for all the quotes. This is really
It's very
cool.
good.
I
So-
found that interview and I loved
Yeah,
it.
they're good.
Someone actually prepared for this podcast. Ooh, this is not
Well,
really okay.
It's my first linear reread. I had to be prepared, you know.
True.
I woke up. This is what I did. Fashion cast. What's everyone wearing today?
I feel like I'm way too attached to my clothes to like
See, I'm very attached.
ever
to
alter them.
Really? I don't know. I guess maybe I'd be so inclined to do it because I'm used to changing my clothes at least a little bit after I buy them.
All right. Okay. Well, I don't really do that.
No, it's because I'm really tall, so if something's really short, I'm quite often like, let's add some stuff to the bottom of it.
Oh, everything usually fits me quite well.
Yeah, or if it's a maxi dress, so it's too short for me, I cut it off like higher, so it's not a weird length. but
I'm like a super convenient size for clothes.
so lucky.
So,
No, I'm too large and weird shaped for actual clothes.
fashion cast. What's everyone wearing today?
You gotta love Vok. I mean, we have two of the most eventful chapters in the entire books, and we're talking about like the pearls on Sansa's dress. I love it.
I'm sorry, but it annoys me.
No, it's
okay?
great. No, it's funny. That's us. That's us in a nutshell, right? We can find the tiniest thing and spend 20 minutes on it, and
The
Joffrey just died.
logistics of 77 courses.
Oh, and as well, okay, can we talk
I still
about...
feel cheated that we didn't get the other 60 odd courses, but
Just ask George someday. I'm sure he'll tell you.
I'm sure he knows them all.
I'm sure
That
he
would
does.
actually be a good question.
Just be like, and can you give me the recipes for them all too? Thanks.
He would
probably
probably
have them
enjoy
all-
it because it's something about winds.
Fashion cast. What's everyone wearing today? When I was like 15, I started reading A Song of Ice and Fire, and the guy who recommended the books to me is 10 years older than me, and he'd make these really creepy comments, and he compared himself to Littlefinger and me to Sansa at one point. We don't talk anymore.
I imagine. Ew.
Such a fucking creep. So gross.
Well, at least he introduced you to the books, though, so some good came out of the creep.
I would have read them anyway. They were on my list anyway. He just sped it up by like maybe half a year or something.
Okay.
So I wouldn't have needed that.
Honestly,
he got me the Hedge Knight comics, which is nice. So, still have
3
those.
books, yay! But still, like,
And
fucking.
he got me the Tolkien ensemble CDs as well. So some good things came out of it.
Creepiness
Is it
can
bad?
sometimes to awards.
But honestly, people who are in their 20s and are going after teenagers, there's a reason why. Like, if you're a teenager, do not go out with someone who's in their 20s.
Right.
Because you should not be going out with them, and there's a
Right.
reason why they are going out and aiming for you. Like,
My ex cheated on me with a 15-year-old when he was 25.
yeah, no, bye.
He's
I'm
my-
calling the police.
We have way too much ew in this podcast.
I should have.
Littlefinger
Would just be
brings
like,
it.
ooh, cast, and then be like,
Yes.
wait till the last
Ew-cast.
chapter.
That's going to
But
be the name.
let's talk about fashion.
I would say, is this ew cast or fashion cast?
No, it's fashion cast with a hint of ew.
Yeah. Not the most cheerful episode we've had.
We have chirping birds.
And fashion cast.
Yes. Well, the fashion cast made it a bloody cheerful episode. Thank you.
That is true.
There we go.
That is true. Very good part of the episode.
I mean, it's funny because we're all getting all like, oh, it's creepy, oh, it's that, whatever. But I mean, if you ask your average person, this is one, well, not this chapter, but the one before it is one of the best chapters ever. Joffrey dies, yay!
But the 77 courses. I mean, I don't understand. Fashion cast. What's everyone wearing today?
All black like every day.
Really? I don't know how Littlefinger would feel about that. I think you should be careful what you eat and drink.
What am I wearing? Jeans and a hoodie and a Minions t-shirt because they're cool.
Love
Sure.
Minions.
It's actually
Littlefinger
really
feel about
comfy.
Minions?
But I don't know, because I went to Singapore recently and I went to Universal Studios, so it's actually like I got it there. But it's really, really comfy, like really comfy. So it's good.
What are you wearing, Hannah?
Yeah.
What are you wearing?
Yeah, fashion cast.
I am
Fashion cast.
wearing a Tool t-shirt and green pajamas.
Awesome.
I never changed. I'm still wearing the black undershirt I wear under my shirt at work, and I was going to change into something like Game of Thronesy, but I thought that was really too geeky.
No one can see.
How nerdy would it be to change just for the podcast, right?
A shadow baby needs no intro. She arrives precisely when she means to.
I'm really excited about all the murder mystery podcasts we have coming out.
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting more into murder mystery type things.
Yeah, I only
So-
got into that because of you, okay, and I don't think it's a good thing, but that's how it is.